Hey guys, tonight we're pouring ourselves a mug of the strangest hidden history ever brewed into a single red can. The true story behind Maxwell House coffee, a brand that quietly smuggled a Civil War prison, a fake presidential quote, and a sacred book into your grandmother's kitchen. Not with drama, not with scandal, just with beans. A slogan nobody actually said, and a hotel that would eventually catch fire on Christmas. I'm always glad you keep turning up here, and that this channel has quietly become your strange little bedtime ritual. If a quiet story has ever put you under well before the final sentence, tapping subscribe helps one more sleepy stranger find the same warm fog. And if your thumbs still work, drop a comment with the town you're dozing off in tonight, plus the one coffee your family makes that should probably be reported to the authorities. Now settle in. Get the fan going, turn the lamp down low, and haul the blanket up over one shoulder. Maybe set down your own cup first. Ideally not the one you've been reheating since breakfast. Ever wondered how a man who never drank anything stronger than coffee built an empire on it? Why a fancy hotel handed out £20 of free coffee and then sat back and waited? What a bear-hunting president has to do with the most famous coffee slogan in America? How a rabbi once ruled that a bean is secretly a berry? Why an advertising booklet ended up being read at the White House? Did anyone ever actually taste that last drop? The one everyone kept promising was so good. Congratulations. You just woke up at a general store counter in Tennessee, sometime around 1878, and the grocer is reaching for the coffee barrel. There is no brand on it. There is no label. There is only a scoop, a scale, and a thumb resting a little too close to it. Good luck. You are standing at the counter of a general store in 1878, waiting for the grocer to scoop your coffee out of a barrel. There is no bag with a picture on it, no brand, no promise of anything. There is a wooden barrel of hard green beans, a tin scoop, and a set of scales the grocer keeps a thumb near. You point, he weighs, he pours the beans into a twist of brown paper, and the entire quality of your mornings for the next 2 weeks is now decided by that scoop. The grocer's name is Mr. Pruitt, and he weighs your coffee with the solemn face of a man performing surgery. He licks his thumb. He rests it just so on the rim of the scale pan, a gesture he would deny under oath, and the needle settles wherever is most convenient for Mr. Pruitt. You watch this happen. He watches, you watch it. Nothing is said, because this is simply how coffee is bought, and complaining about the thumb is like complaining about the weather. The beans themselves are green, not roasted, not ground, not ready for anything. They are hard, pale, and faintly sour smelling, closer to dried peas than to anything you would call coffee. That work is still ahead of you. At home, over your own fire, the barrel sells you potential, and nothing more. What you do with it is your problem, which the barrel makes very clear by not caring. You cannot be loyal to a brand here, because there is no brand to be loyal to. 1 week the barrel holds decent beans from one shipment. The next week it holds whatever the wholesaler could get, which might be older, might be broken, might have spent a damp month in a warehouse developing a personality. You cannot ask for the good barrel. There is only the barrel, and the barrel is in a mood. Your great-grandchildren will not believe this part. Buying coffee in 1878 is buying a mystery box, except the mystery is whether tomorrow's breakfast will be drinkable. It is like ordering off a menu written in a language nobody at the table speaks. You hand over your coins on faith, you carry home your paper twist on faith, and you find out how you did somewhere around dawn. Mr. Pruitt does offer opinions, unprompted, at no charge. This lot came in fine, he says. About coffee he has not tasted. Best he has had in months, he says. About every lot, always. His confidence has the structural integrity of a soap bubble, and you have learned to hold it at exactly that value. He is not lying. Precisely. He is a man who needs the barrel to empty before it spoils, and enthusiasm is the cheapest tool he owns. You watch him twist the paper shut with 2 quick folds, the same fold he has done 10,000 times, and he slides the little parcel across the counter like a card dealer. You take it. You have now purchased 2 weeks of uncertainty for a handful of coins, and the coins were the easy part. The paper is warm from his hands. The beans inside rattle like gravel. Out on the street you tuck the twist under your arm and start home, and the whole strange bargain sits with you. Somewhere in the world there are people who could tell one bean from another by smell alone, who could build a cup that tastes the same every single morning. You have never met one. You have never heard of one. As far as you know, coffee is a barrel, a scoop, and a grocer's thumb, and it always will be. The beans keep rattling. The scoop, back in the barrel, is already dry, waiting for the next hopeful soul with coins and low expectations. You get home with your paper twist of green beans, and now the real work begins, because nobody has roasted them for you. You pour the hard pale beans into a heavy iron skillet, set it over the hottest part of the stove, and pick up a long spoon, and you do not put that spoon down for 20 minutes. The beans have to be shaken constantly. They crackle, they pop, they throw off smoke, and somewhere in the next quarter hour you have to decide, by smell alone, the exact second they are done. The skillet is heavy and the fire is high, and within a minute the kitchen is not a pleasant place to be. Blue smoke rises off the beans and hangs in the air, and it does not politely leave. It settles into the curtains, into your hair, into the very idea of the room, so that your whole house smells faintly of scorched coffee for the rest of the day and mildly of it for the rest of the week. This is not a candle brand of coffee smell. This is closer to a small controlled fire that you are personally responsible for. Your Aunt Della does this by ear and considers you an amateur for using your eyes. She stands over her own skillet with her head tilted, listening for the first crack, then the second crack, timing the whole thing to sounds you cannot even reliably hear. When the beans reach whatever private landmark she is waiting for, she pulls the skillet off the heat in one motion, without hesitation, the way a card player lays down a winning hand. She has never once explained how she knows. She would consider explaining it a kind of cheating. You, meanwhile, are guessing. Roast too little and the beans stay pale, grassy and sour, and the coffee they make tastes like a vague rumour of coffee. Roast too long, look away for even a moment, and they slide from brown to black to ruined, and now you have a skillet of bitter little cinders and a house full of smoke to show for it. The window between good and ruined is about 90 seconds wide, and it does not send a warning. Anyone who buys coffee later would be horrified by this part. Every single morning cup starts with a household chore that is one distraction away from a scorched disaster. You are in effect running a small chemistry experiment before dawn, over open flame, while half asleep, with your breakfast as the stakes. There is no undo. There is only the skillet, the smoke, and your own increasingly panicked nose. The beans change as they roast, and if you are paying attention, it is genuinely a little dramatic. They swell. They crackle like a tiny campfire. They shed papery chaff that lifts and drifts and lands on the stove, on the floor, on you. The smell shifts from sour to nutty to something rich and dark, and finally, if you have waited one breath too long, to something acrid and accusing. The skillet does not judge you. It does not need to. The smell does all the judging on its behalf. When you decide it is done, and it is always a decision rather than a certainty, you tip the hot beans out to cool. They tick and settle as they lose their heat, and you look at them the way you look at anything you made under pressure and hope you did not ruin. Some are darker than others. A few are probably scorched. That unevenness will follow the beans all the way into the cup, and you have to do this again in 2 weeks. And again, after that, forever. Roasting your own coffee is not a hobby you have chosen. It is a standing appointment with a skillet and a cloud of smoke kept by nearly every household in the country, none of whom have any reason to imagine it could ever be someone else's job. You clamp the little cast iron grinder to the edge of the table, tip in a handful of your home-roasted beans, and start turning the crank. It squeals, it resists. Coffee dust drifts down onto the wood while your arm works, and only when you have enough grounds do you find out what kind of day this is going to be. Because the truth of coffee in 1878 is that you never quite know. One morning it is rich and dark, the next it is thin and sour, and you drink it anyway. The grinder is a small, ornate thing, cast iron and a little wooden drawer, and it fights you the entire way. You brace it with one hand and crank with the other, and the beans grind between the burrs with a sound like tiny bones. Turn too fast and the beans skip. Turn too slow and your arm gives out before the drawer fills. The work has a rhythm, and if you have done it since childhood, which you have, your body knows it before your mind wakes up. Grandpa Ames grinds his coffee the night before and swears it makes no difference, which is how you know it makes a difference. He sets the grinder on the table after supper, cranks out tomorrow's grounds while he still has the strength, and taps the little drawer twice against the wood to knock everything loose. 2 taps, always 2. He has done it so long that the taps arrive without him deciding to make them, and the coffee it produces the next morning is, by his own cheerful admission, exactly as unpredictable as everyone else's. Because here is the thing the grinding cannot fix. Your beans were roasted unevenly, some dark, some pale, a few frankly scorched, and grinding them together does not average out the problem. It bakes it in. The dark ones give bitterness, the pale ones give sourness, and the cup you brew carries both at once, arguing. Grinding is not quality control. Grinding is just the last step before the gamble pays out or does not. You brew it the old way, which is to say roughly. Grounds go straight into the pot, water goes in after, and the whole thing boils on the stove until it looks like coffee and smells like morning. There is no filter standing between you and the grounds. They swirl, they settle, they lie in wait, and no matter how careful you are, the last inch of every cup holds a little silt that finds your teeth like an ambush. You have learned to stop drinking one swallow early. Everyone has. What you have never once had, not on your best morning, is consistency. The idea that a cup of coffee could taste the same 2 days running is not something you long for, because it is not something you have imagined. It would be like wishing the weather were identical every day. Coffee is a thing that happens to you freshly, each dawn, and you meet it where it is. Basically, it is a slot machine you operate with your own tired arm before sunrise, and mostly it pays out something lukewarm, bitter and watery, and yet you drink it. Sour or rich, thin or strong, you wrap your hands around the warm cup and you drink it, because it is hot, and it is yours, and it is the thing that turns a person into a functioning member of the morning. The bad cups you forgive by lunch, the good ones you barely notice, because you have no way to make them happen again on purpose. Somewhere out there, though you do not know it, a man is training his nose to fix exactly this. To take the guessing, the scorching, the silt and the arm ache, and lift them off your shoulders entirely, and to sell you back a cup that tastes the same every single time. You would not believe him if he told you. You would keep cranking. The grinder squeals on, and the dust keeps drifting, and the drawer is never quite full. You are a travelling grocery salesman in the 1870s, which means you spend most of your life on a horse. Your saddlebags are packed with samples, your territory covers half of Tennessee and a good stretch of Kentucky, and your office is whatever country store you can reach before dark. You ride between towns, you sleep in roadside inns, and you learn the grocery trade one dusty counter at a time. Your name is Joel Cheek, you are still young, and you have started to notice that everyone sells coffee and nobody sells it well. The job has a name, and the name is drummer, because you drum up business. It is a job with no walls. Your commute is measured in counties. Your desk is a saddle. Your co-workers are a horse who has opinions about weather and a set of saddlebags that smell permanently of every sample you have ever carried. Basically, you are a delivery route, a sales force, and a small warehouse folded into one man on one animal, and the animal is doing the harder half. You were, a couple of years ago, a school teacher, which lasted about as long as anyone expected. Teaching paid in respect and very little else, and you had married Minnie Ritchie with the reasonable intention of eventually feeding a family. So you climbed down off the schoolhouse steps and up onto a horse, and you traded a room full of children for a state full of merchants, and only one of those groups can be reasoned with, and it is not the one you left. The riding is the job. You are out before light, and you cover ground all day, and the miles do not care whether it is raining. Your innkeeper each night is a stranger. Tonight it is a man named Beckworth, who runs a roadside inn and greets every guest by immediately explaining the rules of his establishment, of which there are many, delivered while he wipes the same spot on the counter he has been wiping since you walked in. You take your room. You do not argue with Beckworth. Nobody argues with Beckworth. You eat what the inn serves, and part of every meal, always, is coffee. And because you now taste it in a dozen different towns a month, you have become an accidental expert in exactly how bad it can be. Sour in one county, scorched in the next, watery at Beckworth's. You are drinking a survey of American coffee whether you want to or not, and the survey has one very clear finding, which is that the whole country is guessing. That finding will not leave you alone. Everyone buys coffee. Everyone buys it constantly, every week, in every town on your route, and every single one of them is rolling the dice on a barrel and a skillet. You start to think about it the way a salesman thinks about anything. Here is a thing sold everywhere, badly, to people who would happily pay for it to be sold well. You do not yet know what to do with the thought, but you have started carrying it in the saddlebags along with the samples. You invest a little in the wholesale grocery firm you ride for, and your name goes onto it, and now you are a small part owner of the counter you ride between. The step up comes with more responsibility and exactly the same amount of saddle. You are still out on the road. But now the coffee question is not idle curiosity. It's business now, and business is the one language you have become truly fluent in. At night, in another borrowed room, you turn it over. A consistent cup, dark, steady, and reliable. The same taste, every morning, guaranteed by a name people could trust. It sounds, out here on a horse, like a fantasy, but you have a nose that is getting sharper by the county and a growing certainty that the whole country is waiting for someone to fix a problem it has stopped noticing. The horse sleeps. You do not, quite. Tomorrow there is another store. You spend your days convincing suspicious storekeepers to stock things they are not sure they need. You dismount, you tie up the horse, you walk in with your samples, and you make your case to a man who has heard 100 salesmen before you and believed roughly 2 of them. You learn quickly that the merchant does not care about your enthusiasm. He cares about whether the barrel will empty before it spoils and whether his customers will come back. So you learn to talk about the thing everyone buys every single week, which is coffee. Today's merchant is Mr. Tillman, who runs a store where he can see every shelf from a single stool and does not intend to get off it for you. He listens with his arms folded, which is not a promising posture. When you finish your pitch, he lets a silence sit there, testing whether you will panic and fill it. You have learned not to. You have learned that the silence is part of the negotiation, and the man who speaks first has usually lost, and it is not going to be you. Tillman finally leans forward, uncrosses one arm, and taps a single finger on the counter, twice, right beside your sample, as if pointing at the exact spot where your promises will fail. Will it move? He asks. Not is it good? Not do I like it? Will it move? That is the only question a country storekeeper has ever really asked, and you have heard it in 40 towns, and you will hear it in 40 more, always with the same finger tap and the same flat, patient, and unimpressed eyes. You have come to respect the question, because it is the honest one. A merchant lives and dies by turnover. A barrel that sells out fast is money. A barrel that sits and goes stale is a slow loss he has to eat with a smile. He is not being difficult when he doubts you. He is being a man who has been burned by confident strangers before, and confident strangers are basically your entire profession, so his suspicion is really just accurate memory. And every single one of them sells coffee. It does not matter how small the town or how bare the shelves. Flour, salt, coffee. Those move no matter what, because people cannot go without them. Which makes coffee the one product where you never have to argue that anybody wants it. The argument is only ever about whose coffee, and right now the answer is nobody's coffee, because it comes from a barrel with no name on it and no one to blame or thank. That gap starts to look, from the seat of your saddle, like the largest unlocked door you have ever ridden past. Here is a thing sold in every store you visit. Here is a thing bought by every household on the route. And here is a thing that carries no name, inspires no loyalty, and disappoints its customers on a rotating schedule. It is basically a market of people who all buy the same disappointing product and would switch in a heartbeat if something better wore a label they could ask for out loud. You start listening differently at each counter. When a merchant complains that a coffee lot came in poor, you do not just nod, you file it away. When a customer sends beans back sour, you notice. You are collecting a very specific kind of information, the kind that says the demand is already here, fully formed, waiting, and the only thing missing is a product worth the name and a name worth trusting. Tillman, in the end, takes a small order, mostly to get you to leave. It is not a triumph. It is a man betting a little to make a persistent salesman go away, and you take it gladly, because small orders are how routes are built. You untie the horse, you climb back up, and you ride on carrying the same growing thought, heavier now, turning slowly from an idle notice into something that looks a great deal like a plan. You have decided that the future is in coffee, so you find yourself sitting across from a British coffee broker named Roger Nolly Smith, who is about to ruin ordinary coffee for you forever. Smith can hold a handful of raw green beans to his nose and tell you what country they came from. You cannot do this. Not yet. So you sit, and you smell, and you taste cup after cup, and you begin the slow work of training your own nose to notice the difference between beans that a barrel would treat as identical. Smith does the trick in front of you the first day, and it is genuinely unsettling. He lifts a scoop of green beans, holds them under his nose, breathes in once, and names the country like a man reading a label that is not there. He does not perform it. He does not pause for effect. He says it the way you would say the colour of a wall, mildly already reaching for the next scoop, while you sit there recalculating everything you thought you knew about a bean. What this tells you is humbling. To Smith, the barrel at the general store is not a mystery at all. It is a conversation, and you have been illiterate your whole life. Every bean carries where it grew, how it dried, how long it sat. You have been drinking that information every morning and reading none of it, like a man eating the newspaper for the fibre. And now, slowly, painfully, at your age, you are going to learn to read it too. So you cup coffee together, which is a fancy word for tasting it with your whole face. You lean over the cup, you breathe the steam, you take a loud, unlovely slurp that sprays the coffee across your tongue, and you pay attention to everything that happens next. Is it bright? Is it flat? Does it turn bitter at the finish, or does it fade clean? Smith names each thing before you can, every time, patiently, the way you once corrected a child's arithmetic, and you begin to understand how it felt to be that child. The goal is not to admire coffee. The goal is to build one. A blend. You are learning to taste so that you can combine beans the way a good cook combines ingredients. One for body, one for brightness, one to round the rough edge off the others. No single bean is the answer. The answer is a proportion, a recipe, and the recipe has to taste like itself every time or it is worthless. Basically, you are trying to compose a chord that plays the same note in 10,000 kitchens you will never visit. It takes years, and the years are not glamorous. They are a long parade of nearly right. This blend is good but sours as it cools. This one is smooth, round, and utterly forgettable. This one was perfect on Tuesday and wrong on Thursday, and Smith just shrugs and reaches for the next scoop, unbothered, because to him a failed blend is not a tragedy, it is Tuesday. You learn to borrow his patience. You have no choice. Your own patience keeps burning out around the 40th cup, and somewhere in that parade your nose changes. It happens gradually, and then it has happened. One afternoon you pick up a green bean, breathe it in without thinking, and you know something about it that you could not have known a year ago. But Smith glances at your face and gives the smallest nod, the nod of one literate man to another, and you understand that you have crossed over. You can read the bean now. What you have, by the end, is not just a recipe, a nose you built on purpose. You started as a man who bought coffee from a barrel and hoped. You are ending as a man who can taste the difference and, more dangerously, reproduce it. All that remains is to convince one important customer that the difference is real. You have the blend. Now you need a room to prove it in. You have your blend, and now you have the hardest problem a person with a good product can have, which is proving it to someone who did not ask. So you do something that feels reckless. You walk into the kitchen of the grandest hotel in Nashville, you hand the food buyer £20 of your coffee, and you tell him it costs nothing. Just serve it. He looks at you the way people look at anyone offering something for free. You leave the coffee on his counter and you go home to wait. £20 is not a sample. A sample is a spoonful, a taste, a thing a man can wave off. £20 is a commitment. A small mountain of coffee, enough to serve the hotel's guests for days without anyone having to decide anything. That is the whole trick, and it is a deliberate one. You are not asking the buyer to believe you. You are asking him to do nothing, which is the one thing everyone is good at, while your coffee quietly does the believing on its own. The food buyer, a careful man named Hollis, receives your mountain of coffee with open suspicion. Free is a word that makes a professional buyer nervous, because free is usually the front half of a sentence whose back half costs money. He asks what the catch is. You tell him there is no catch, which is true, and which sounds exactly like what a man with a catch would say. He sets the bags down. He does not thank you. He is already deciding how little of his day this will cost him. What you are betting on is not Hollis. Hollis is a wall you are throwing the ball over. You are betting on the guests, the hundreds of people who will drink that coffee over the next few days without being told anything about it, who will simply notice, In the quiet, private way people notice a good cup, that this morning's coffee is rounder, richer, and cleaner than usual. You cannot make them notice. You can only give them something worth noticing and get out of the way. Handing over 20 pounds of your life's work and then leaving takes a strange kind of confidence. You have spent years building this blend with Smith, chasing consistency across 100 failed cups. And now the whole pitch comes down to whether strangers will taste the difference, is there? If you are wrong about the coffee, you're about to find out for the price of 20 free pounds. But you are not wrong about the coffee. You know you are not, the way a person knows a thing they have tested 10,000 times, and that certainty is the only reason a stunt this expensive makes any sense. A worse coffee would need a louder salesman. Yours needs the opposite. It needs quiet and a fair chance and a few days in front of people whose only job in the moment is to drink something hot and form an honest opinion. So you go home. This is the hardest part, and it's hard precisely because there is nothing left to do. You cannot follow the coffee into the dining room. You cannot stand over the guests and watch their faces. You have loaded the whole argument into 20 pounds of ground beans and handed it to a skeptical man named Hollis, and now the argument will either make itself or it will not, and you will have no vote in the matter until it is over. You wait a few days, with half your mind back in that hotel kitchen. You imagine the bags emptying. You imagine, because you cannot help it, the moment the free coffee runs out and Hollis reaches for his usual supplier and everything goes quietly back to normal, and your 20 pounds becomes 20 pounds of nothing. That is the whole game. The coffee is out there being drunk by strangers, and you have bet your best blend on the possibility that they will miss it when it is gone. You are the food buyer at the Maxwell House Hotel, and a man has just left 20 pounds of free coffee on your counter, so you shrug and you serve it. For a few days the guests drink it. Then the free coffee runs out, you switch back to your usual supplier, and you assume that is the end of a minor favour to a persistent salesman. It is not the end, because within a day the complaints start arriving at your kitchen door, and they are not complaints about the food. They are about the coffee. Specifically, they are about the coffee being worse, which is a thing you did not know guests could detect, because for years the coffee has simply been the coffee, poured and drunk and never mentioned. Now, suddenly, people are mentioning it. A gentleman at breakfast asks whether something has changed. A regular guest says, carefully, that the cup this morning was not what he had grown used to. The kitchen has a reputation to protect, and the coffee, of all things, is threatening it. You did not see this coming, and that is the part that unsettles you. You served the free coffee expecting nothing, a small courtesy, a way to use up a stranger's gift without spending a cent. You never told a single guest it had changed. You never pointed it out. And yet they noticed anyway, quietly, on their own, and now that it is gone they are noticing its absence even more loudly, which is a far more dangerous thing for a hotel than a compliment. A head waiter named Dobbs corners you by the pass and relays the mood of the dining room with the grim efficiency of a man reporting weather at sea. The guests, he says, want the good coffee back. He does not editorialize. He wipes his hands on his apron, folds them and waits. Because Dobbs has been carrying guest complaints across this dining room for 20 years and he knows that the buyer, not the waiter, is the one who has to fix it. He is simply the messenger, and the message is short. What has actually happened, though you would not phrase it this way, is that you ran an experiment without meaning to, and the experiment gave a brutally clear result. For a few days your guests drank a genuinely good cup. Then they drank the ordinary one again, and the gap between the two was wide enough that people who had never once thought about coffee in their lives suddenly had strong feelings about it. That is not a small thing. That is a product that sells itself, which is the rarest thing a buyer ever sees. You think about the salesman who left the bags, the one with the 2 honest answers about there being no catch. It turns out there was a catch after all. The catch was that his coffee was good enough to make your own coffee look bad, and now you cannot unsee it. And neither can the dining room. He did not trap you with a contract. He trapped you with a standard, which is much harder to escape. So you do the math a buyer does. Buying his coffee will cost more than the anonymous barrel you have always used. But keeping the anonymous, tired, and forgettable barrel is now costing you something too. In complaints. In that careful question at breakfast. In the slow erosion of the one thing a grand hotel sells above all, which is the feeling that everything here is simply better. Cheaper coffee that annoys your best guests is not actually cheaper. It only looks that way on the invoice. You send word that you will take his blend, not for free this time, but as a paying customer who has been quietly outmaneuvered and knows it. The complaints will stop. The good cup will come back. And a persistent salesman with a trained nose will have won the exact bet he rode into town to make, using nothing but £20 of coffee and the patience to let your own guests argue his case for him. You have won. The hotel wants your blend, only your blend, and they are willing to pay for it, which changes everything about your week. But you ask them for one more thing, and it is not money. You ask if you can name the coffee after the hotel itself. You want to put those two words on every future can, because a name like that carries weight no salesman can buy. They think about it for a few months, they watch the guests keep drinking, and eventually they say yes. Now, your coffee has a name, a strange request, and you know it, because you are not asking for the obvious thing. The obvious thing is the contract, the steady orders, the money that comes from being the coffee of a famous hotel. You have that. What you are reaching for instead is the name, which costs the hotel nothing, and is worth, to you, more than the contract itself. You are asking to borrow their reputation and carry it out the door in a sack of ground beans, because you understand something most people selling coffee do not. A barrel has no name, and a thing with no name cannot be asked for. When your coffee is called Maxwell House, a customer can walk into any store in the country and say those two words out loud, and the words will mean the finest hotel in Nashville, the place presidents stay, the standard against which lesser establishments measure themselves. You are not naming a coffee, you are attaching it to a feeling people already have. The hotel's owners are cautious about it, which is fair, because a name is a thing you cannot fully take back once it is loose in the world. If your coffee turns out badly somewhere down the line, it is their name on the failure, so they wait. They watch the guests keep asking for the good cup, month after month, and slowly they come around to the view that lending the name is a small risk against a large flattery. Their coffee is famous. Why not? One of the owners, a careful, slow and deliberate man named Overton with the family's stake to protect, is said to weigh it the way he weighs everything, slowly, turning the idea over before setting it down in its place. He does not gush. He does not shake your hand and call it a triumph. He simply arrives, eventually, at yes, and a yes from a cautious man is worth 3 from an eager one, because you know it will hold. And so the coffee becomes Maxwell House, and the moment those words go onto the product, you have done something no barrel ever could. You have made the coffee askable. A woman in a store 100 miles from Nashville, who has never seen the hotel and never will, can now request your blend by name and know she is getting the same thing she got last time. That sameness, guaranteed by a name, is the entire thing you have been building towards since the horse. You are borrowing a landmark and stamping it on a tin, decades before anyone would call it branding, before there is even a proper word for what you understand in your bones. The hotel gets a little glory. You get a name that does the selling for you in 1,000 rooms you will never enter. It's the cheapest, shrewdest trade of your life, and both sides walk away certain they got the better of it. You look at the name on the first labels and feel the shape of the future in it. This is no longer a salesman with a good blend and a tired horse. This is a product with a reputation stitched into its very name, ready to travel anywhere a store will stock it. The hotel will stand for decades yet, grand and full of important guests, lending its dignity to every can. Neither you nor the hotel can imagine that one day the cans will outlast the building entirely. You are a guest at the Maxwell House Hotel in the 1880s, and dinner here is a performance with rules you are expected to already know. You come down to the grand dining room, you are shown to a table according to a logic you do not control, and a small army of waiters moves around you in a choreography built entirely on who matters and who is merely paying. The coffee arrives at the end, poured with ceremony, and you are meant to understand that being served it here is itself a kind of status. The seating is the first test, and it is a test you take without being told it is happening. The headwaiter reads you in a glance, the cut of your coat, the ease of your walk, whether you hesitate at the threshold, and he assigns you a table that reflects his verdict. The good tables are near the centre, seen and serving. The lesser tables drift toward the edges, near the doors, near the traffic. You are placed. You do not choose. And where you are placed says out loud what the room has decided about you. The headwaiter is named Percival, and he runs the floor like a general who has never once raised his voice. He directs the whole moving picture with the smallest gestures, a lifted 2 fingers here, a slight turn of the head there, and waiters peel off to their duties as if pulled by strings. He never hurries. He never explains. He simply stands at the edge of the room, seeing everything, and the entire dinner arranges itself around the fact of his attention. The waiters move in a pattern so practiced it looks accidental, which is the whole art of it. Plates arrive from your left, are cleared from your right, and no dish ever seems to be carried so much as to appear. Nobody reaches across you. Nobody asks what you would like twice. The service is designed to feel like weather, something that simply happens around you, warm, constant, and invisible, requiring nothing of you but that you sit inside it and let yourself be tended. And then, at the end, comes the coffee, and the coffee is treated like the finale it is. It is not sloshed into a mug and set down. It is brought in its own vessel, poured at the table in a thin, steady stream, the cup filled to precisely the right level, and no higher, and set before you with a small settling of the saucer that functions as a full stop. This is the good coffee, the blend that made the guests complain when it vanished, and the hotel now serves it like a closing argument. What you are meant to feel, sipping it, is that you have arrived somewhere. The coffee at the Maxwell House is basically a membership card you drink, proof that you sat in the finest room in Nashville and were tended by Percival's silent army and served the cup that presidents are served. Nobody says any of this. Saying it would ruin it. The whole point is that it goes without saying, and you are expected to be the kind of person for whom it does. There is a quiet hierarchy even in the poor. The center tables are served first, with a fraction more ceremony, while the edge tables wait their small turn. It is never rude. It is never obvious. It is simply the room reminding everyone, gently, in the choreography of coffee, exactly where they sit in the order of things tonight. You finish the cup. Percival, without appearing to look, already knows your table is done, and a waiter materializes to clear it. You rise and you carry out of the room a feeling that has nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with having been, for one evening, inside the machine that quietly decides who matters. The coffee was good to the last drop, but the last drop was never really the point. The room was the point, and the coffee was how the room signed its name. You are held on the upper floor of a half-finished hotel in 1863, and nobody is serving you coffee. The building is not a hotel yet. It is a brick shell the Union Army has taken over, and it is being used as a barracks, a hospital, and a prison, and you are on the prison side of that arrangement. The rooms are crowded, the staircases are strained past what they were built for, and the grand hotel that will one day sell a comforting cup of coffee is, right now, the least comforting place in Nashville. The building was meant to be a palace. You can still see it in the bones, the wide landings, the tall windows, the grand proportions of a place designed for chandeliers and important men. Instead, the important men are guards, the chandeliers are absent, and the wide landings are packed with prisoners the way a barrel is packed with beans. The luxury is all still drawn into the architecture, waiting, like a stage set built for a play that keeps getting postponed. The war put the whole project to sleep. Construction stopped when Nashville fell to the Union in early 1862, and the army took the unfinished shell for its own uses, because an army needs walls and does not much care whether they are fancy. So the hotel became a place to hold men, and you are one of the men, and the fancy walls hold you exactly as well as plain ones would. The bricks do not know they were meant for better. The bricks are just doing their job. There are too many of you. That is the plain fact of the place, spoken flatly because it does not need decoration. The rooms hold more men than rooms should, and the stairs carry more traffic than stairs were built to carry, up and down, all day, boots on wood that was never asked to bear a crowd. The building was designed for guests who would drift up to their rooms a few at a time. The place is being used by a mass of people who all need to move at once. And in September of 1863, a staircase gives way. It happens the way these things happen, suddenly and completely, under the weight of too many men in a structure never meant for them. Several prisoners are killed in the fall, others are hurt. The plain facts are these, and they are grim, and the kindest thing is to let them sit there plainly rather than dress them up. A staircase in a half-built hotel came down, and men who were already prisoners of war did not survive it. The building absorbs it the way old buildings absorb everything, without comment, and goes on being what the war needs it to be. The stairs are shored up. The crowding does not ease. The place that will someday be famous for a warm cup and a cheerful slogan is, in this year, cramped, cold, and grim, a ledger of hard days, and it keeps that ledger quietly, the way a house keeps the memory of everyone who ever lived hard inside it. The bricks say nothing. They are good at saying nothing. This is the part the advertisements will never mention. There is no jingle in a collapsed staircase. There is no slogan that survives standing next to the year 1863 in this building. So the story will be quietly folded away, and the hotel that reopens after the war will be all chandeliers and presidents and fine coffee, its harder history sealed up inside the walls. But you are here now, before the chandeliers, before the coffee, when the grand hotel is just a crowded shell doing grim work in a hard year. Someday men will sip a famous blend in a warm dining room downstairs and feel that they have arrived somewhere fine. You are in the same building, up the strained stairs, and you have arrived somewhere too. The walls are identical. Only the century is different, and the century is the only thing that ever changes the meaning of a room. You work in a coffee roasting plant around 1905, and your whole day is heat, noise, and the smell of browning beans. Great iron drums turn over gas flames, roaring like furnaces, while sacks of green coffee stand stacked to the rafters waiting their turn. You feed the beans in raw and pale, you pull them out dark and fragrant, and the smell of the roast rolls out the doors and drifts for blocks so that half the neighborhood knows what you make before they ever read a label. This is the household skillet grown monstrous. What your grandmother did in an iron pan over a stove, shaking 20 minutes and praying, you now do, to hundreds of pounds at once in a machine roughly the size of a small boiler. The principle has not changed at all. Green beans go in, heat is applied, and someone decides the exact moment they are done. Only now the pan is a roaring iron drum, and the someone is you, and the stakes are measured in hundreds of pounds instead of one family's mourning. The noise is constant and enormous. The burners roar, the drums rumble as they turn, the cooling trays rattle, and men call to each other over the top of all of it in the clipped shorthand of people who cannot afford to repeat themselves. You stopped hearing it as noise weeks ago. Now it is simply the sound the day makes, a wall of rumble and roar that you would probably find unsettling in its absence, the way a sailor is unsettled by a calm. The foreman is a broad man named Kessler who judges a roast by tossing a few beans in his palm and staring at them like they owe him money. He does not use the instruments the way the younger men do. He rolls the hot beans across his hand, feels the heat of them, reads the colour, and calls the drum with a single flat word, now, and the beans are pulled. He is right nearly every time, and on the rare morning he is wrong, he simply grunts and adjusts, because Kessler does not believe in apologising to coffee. The smell is the thing that follows you home. The smell is in your clothes, your hair, the creases of your hands, a deep roasted and stubborn thing that no amount of washing fully removes, and after a few years you stop trying. Your family knows what you do for a living from across a room. Your whole street knows. The plant broadcasts itself for blocks in every direction, a standing advertisement made of pure aroma, selling the product to people who have not yet realized they are being sold to. And this is the quiet miracle of the place, the thing your grandmother could never have managed, consistency. Because you roast the same blend, the same way, to the same color, batch after batch, the coffee that leaves this building tastes like itself every single time. The gamble is gone. The scorched skillet, the sour surprise, the silt at the bottom of an unlucky cup, all of it engineered out by a roaring drum and a foreman who reads beans in his palm. What you make is not just coffee. It is coffee you can count on. You heave the stacked sacks, you split them, you feed the green beans into the drums, and the raw grassy smell gives way to the rich brown smell of the roast, over and over, all day, a transformation you perform so many times it stops feeling like magic and starts feeling like work. At the end of a shift, you step outside, and even in the street, the smell is there, because you carry it with you now. You look back at the plant, roaring and pouring its aroma over the neighborhood, and you understand that you are standing where the old world of the skillet ended. Nobody out here roasts their own anymore. They buy the can. And the can starts here, in the heat and the noise, with you and Kessler and a drum full of beans that are almost done. You stand at the packing line where the ground coffee goes into cans, and you are part of a small revolution that nobody in the room is calling one. The trick is the vacuum. You watch the machine draw the air out of each can before it seals, because coffee with no air around it stays fresh for months instead of days. The old paper bags let the flavor die on the shelf. These cans do not. Every can that leaves your line is a promise that the coffee inside will taste the same as the last. Air is the enemy, though it took the coffee trade a surprisingly long time to name the culprit. Ground coffee sitting in a paper sack goes stale fast, its flavor thinning day by day while it waits on a shelf for someone to buy it, so that even good coffee arrives tired. The vacuum can change the whole equation. Pull the air out, seal the metal tight, and the coffee inside is essentially paused, held in the exact condition it left the roaster, waiting patiently for the day the seal is broken. The line moves and you move with it. Cans arrive empty, get filled with ground coffee, ride into the machine that sucks out the air, and come out the other side sealed, heavy, and honest. Your job is rhythm, hands and eyes matched to the belt, catching the can that sits crooked, pulling the fill that ran light. You have done it long enough that your hands do it without you. The woman working beside you is named Ada, and she can tell a bad seal by sound alone, which nobody taught her and nobody can quite replicate. A properly sealed can has a certain dead solidity when she taps it. A bad one answers a little too lively. She taps as they pass, quick and absent, and every so often her hand darts out to pull a can the machine's passed as fine, and she is never wrong, and she has stopped bothering to explain how she knows because explaining it bores her. What you are really packing, can by can, is trust. A woman in a store far away will pick up this can having never met you, never seen this line, never smelled the roasting drums upstairs. She will carry it home on faith. And when she pries the lid and hears that little hiss of the vacuum letting go, followed by the aroma rising up all at once, that hiss is your handshake reaching her across 1,000 miles. It says the coffee waited for her and did not spoil. Think about what this quietly kills. The skillet is gone. The home grinder can stay in the drawer. The whole smoky, uncertain morning ritual that every household performed for generations is being folded up and replaced by a metal can you can open with your hands. Think of it as a pause button pressed on freshness itself, decades before anyone dreams of the sealed pods and foil pouches that will one day make the same promise with more packaging and less dignity. The cans stack up at the end of the line, identical, sealed, ready to travel anywhere a train can reach. That sameness is the entire point. The thing Cheek chased on horseback and built his name around. A can opened in Memphis tastes like a can opened in Nashville tastes like a can opened next year, because the air never touched any of them. You are not packing coffee so much as packing consistency into metal and shipping it out by the crate. At shift's end, the belt finally stops, and the sudden quiet is almost startling. Ada gives one last idle tap on the nearest can, hears whatever she needs to hear, and pulls off her gloves. You look at the day's work stacked and waiting, thousands of small sealed promises bound for kitchens you will never see. Every one of them will pop with the same little hiss. That hiss is the sound of the old world ending, one can at a time. You are trying to convince a woman who has roasted her own coffee her entire life that she should stop. She is not hostile. She is unconvinced. She has a skillet. She has a grinder. She has a routine older than you are, and you are standing in her doorway holding a metal can and asking her to trust a factory she will never see. So you do the only thing that works. You let her open it, you let her smell it, and you let the hiss of the seal make your argument for you. Her name is Mrs. Farrow, and she has bought green coffee from a barrel since before you were born. So she regards your shiny can the way she would regard a stranger claiming to cook better than her mother. She has a healthy suspicion of anything that arrives already done, because in her experience already done usually means done badly by someone in a hurry. She folds her arms in the doorway. This is not a woman who is going to be talked into anything. So you stop talking, which is the hardest lesson a salesman ever learns. You do not list the features, you do not explain the vacuum, or the roasting drums, or the train noses behind the blend. You simply hand her the can and ask her to open it herself, right there, because the argument you are making cannot be spoken. It can only be smelled. And a can of fresh sealed coffee makes that argument better than any man in a doorway ever could. She pries the lid. There is the hiss, that quick, sharp exhale of air rushing in to fill the vacuum, and then the smell arrives all at once, rich, dark, and immediate. The smell of coffee that has not spent a week going tired in a paper sack. You watch her face do the small, involuntary thing that faces do when they are surprised into approval. She would never say it aloud. But her eyebrows say it, and the eyebrows are not for sale. What you are really selling her is not coffee. She already has coffee. What you are selling her is the end of a chore, the surrender of the smoky skillet and the aching arm at the grinder and the 90-second window between good and scorched. You are offering to take the gamble off her hands entirely, to hand her the same reliable cup every morning with none of the labor and none of the risk. You are offering to do her least favorite part of the day for her, forever, for the price of a can. She pushes back, because of course she does. What is wrong with the way she has always done it? Nothing, you tell her, and you mean it, because insulting the skillet is a fool's move. The skillet has fed her family for decades, but it asks for 20 smoky minutes and a good deal of luck every couple of weeks, and the can asks for nothing but the twist of a lid. You are not calling her old way wrong. You are calling it work she no longer has to do. The hiss has already done most of your job, though, and you both know it. She holds the open can, breathes it in again despite herself, and you can see her doing the private arithmetic of a woman weighing a lifelong habit against a genuinely easier morning. The smell is on her side now. The smell is the best salesman the company has, and it works for free, and it never once oversells. She does not surrender all at once, because women like Mrs. Farrow do not. She takes the one can. She will try it. She will compare it, silently, against her own skillet coffee tomorrow, and you are content to let her, because you know what the can tastes like, and you know what the skillet risks. You tip your hat and step off the porch. The hiss did the talking. You were mostly there to hold the can and get out of the way. You work for the coffee company, and someone needs to come up with a phrase, because a coffee this good deserves words that stick. You are not a president. You are not famous. You are a company man named Clifford Spiller, and you sit with the problem the way anyone sits with a blank page, until 4 words arrive that feel right. Good to the last drop. It is simple, it is warm, and it will outlive you by a century. What it will not do, no matter what the ads later claim, is come from anyone else. The job is harder than it sounds, because the words have to do so much with so little. They have to say the coffee is good, which any coffee says, and then say something truer, the way a cup holds up from the first sip to the bottom, and they have to do it in a handful of syllables a person can remember without trying, because a slogan nobody remembers is just a sentence that cost money. So you turn phrases over the way a man turns stones in his pocket, feeling for the smooth one. The grand ones sound like bragging, the clever ones try too hard, and then, somewhere in the pile, you find the small, plain one that does not sound like advertising at all. Good to the last drop. It sounds like something a satisfied person would just say, unprompted, setting down an empty cup, and that is exactly why it works. It is the cheapest employee the company will ever hire, one that works a century for free while a dead president takes the credit. What you like about it is the last drop. Anyone can promise the first sip is good, when the coffee is hot and the cup is full of optimism. Your phrase makes a bolder claim, quietly. It says the coffee holds. It says the very bottom of the cup, the part that has gone lukewarm while you talked, is still worth drinking. The phrase makes a promise about endurance disguised as a compliment, and it lands so softly that most people will never notice it is a promise at all. Here is the part that history will get wrong, and you would find it funny if it were not so tidy. You wrote this: a company man at a desk, no crowd, no famous mouth, just the ordinary work of finding the right 4 words. But 4 words this good seem to need a legend, and legends do not grow around men named Clifford Spiller. So one day the story will attach itself to someone grander, and your authorship will quietly slip out of the frame, the way the writer always does. That is the strange economy of a slogan. The better it is, the less it seems to belong to the person who made it. A clumsy phrase stays obviously somebody's job. A perfect one floats free, sounds like folk wisdom, feels like it was always just true, and practically begs to be credited to a president or anyone with more shine than its actual author. You are about to be written out of your own best line, and the writing out is, in its backward way, the highest compliment it will ever get. You do not know all that yet, of course. Right now you just have 4 words that feel finished, and the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman who got it right. You say them aloud once more to be sure. Good to the last drop. Nothing rattles. Nothing is wasted. It's the perfect handshake of a phrase, warm, firm, and honest. Over before you can question it. So it goes on to the advertisements, and out into the country, and people begin to say it back without being asked, which is the only proof a slogan ever really passes. It becomes one of the most repeated phrases in the country, and the man who wrote it goes to work the next morning like anyone, a company man in a company chair, holding the small private knowledge that the words everyone will soon be quoting started, unglamorously, with him. You are serving coffee to Theodore Roosevelt in 1907, and years from now the company will build an entire legend around this exact cup. The story they will tell is tidy. He sips, he pauses, he declares the coffee good to the last drop, and a slogan is born from a president's lips. The story you are actually living is messier. He drinks, he is pleased, and what he actually says has more to do with bear hunting than advertising. The tidy version is the one that sells. The true version is the one that happened. Roosevelt is exactly as advertised, which is to say enormous in every way that is not physical. He fills the room with opinions. He drinks his coffee the way he does everything, with tremendous evident enjoyment and no particular ceremony, a large, loud and cheerful man enjoying a hot cup on a visit near Nashville. You pour. He drinks. He approves, loudly, because Roosevelt does not have a quiet setting, and you would remember the moment even if no company had ever decided to make it famous. But what he says, according to the reporting of the day, is not the slogan. It is something far more Roosevelt. He calls it the kind of stuff he likes to drink, by George, when he hunts bears. That is the real quote, or close to it, and it is wonderful precisely because it is so unusable. No advertising department on earth can build a campaign around bears. It is too specific, too strange, too much like an actual man actually talking, so it will be quietly set aside. Because here is what happens next, years later, in a room you are not in. Someone at the company has this perfect 4-word slogan, already written by Clifford Spiller, already out in the world doing its work. And someone notices that a president once praised the coffee, and the temptation is enormous, because a slogan is good but a slogan a president said is a legend. So the two facts drift toward each other, and a story quietly assembles itself in which Roosevelt said the very words. It is tidy, it is powerful. It is also not true. This is basically a celebrity endorsement built after the fact, except the celebrity is a former president, and the endorsement is a sentence he never spoke, stitched onto a real cup he really drank. Nobody has to lie outright. They just let two true things, a real visit and a real slogan, lean against each other until the seam disappears and the public assumes what it was always meant to assume. The bear quote goes in a drawer, the clean version goes on the cans, and it works, the way tidy stories always work, because people would rather remember a president lifting a cup and pronouncing it good to the last drop than remember a company man named Spiller at a desk. The legend is easier to hold. It has a face, a mustache, a booming voice. The truth has an office and a paycheck. Given the choice, the country picks the mustache every time. Decades on, the company itself will quietly walk the story back, admitting the slogan came from Spiller and not from any presidential remark overheard at a cup of coffee. A small, honest correction, issued long after the legend has done all its selling, the historical equivalent of returning a coat once winter is safely over. By then nobody much minds. The slogan has already won. The truth is just tidying up behind it. But you are here at the actual cup, in the actual room, in 1907, watching an actual large man enjoy his coffee and say something delightful about bears. This is the real moment, before the legend files off its rough edges and props it up beside a slogan it never met. He sets down the cup. He moves on to the next enormous opinion, and you have witnessed the small true thing that a big tidy story will one day be built to replace. Good to the last drop, every word of it, except the ones that mattered. You are sitting with the slogan everyone loves, and someone at the table has decided to be clever about it. Good to the last drop, they say, turning it over. But what about the drops before the last one? Were they bad? Is the coffee only good right at the bottom of the cup, and mediocre the whole way down? It is the kind of objection that means nothing and will not go away, and you are the one who has to keep a straight face while a perfectly good phrase gets cross-examined over grammar. The clever man is a fellow named Pratt, who has clearly been saving this observation for an audience, and delivers it with the smug, delighted, and rehearsed air of a person who believes he has caught the entire advertising industry in a logical error. He leans back. He folds his hands over his stomach. He waits for the room to be amazed by him, and the room, being polite, gives him a small portion of what he is fishing for, which only encourages Pratt. And the maddening thing is that Pratt is, technically, correct. Read the sentence coldly, like a lawyer, and it does seem to praise only the final drop while saying nothing about the rest. Good to the last drop. As if the first drop were merely adequate, the middle drop's a slow disappointment, and only at the very bottom, against all odds, does the coffee finally become worth the trouble. By Pratt's count, there are exactly 3 acceptable readings of 4 small words, and only the last one flatters the coffee. It is a funny reading, and beside the point, because nobody actually hears it that way, which is the whole secret of a good slogan. The human ear does not parse a phrase like a lawyer. It takes the warm, obvious meaning, the coffee is good all the way down, right to the very end, and it discards the technicality without noticing there was one. Pratt has found a splinter of logic in a sentence built for the heart, and everyone else has already moved on to their coffee. You have learned not to argue with the Pratts of the world, because arguing concedes that the objection deserves a defense. The slogan does not need defending. It has already won in the only court that matters, which is the ear of a person half awake at breakfast reaching for something warm. A phrase that people repeat to each other without being asked is not vulnerable to grammar. It is basically weatherproof, and Pratt is out in the yard shaking his fist at a house built to withstand exactly him. Still, the objection has a way of sticking to the phrase like a burr, passed along from clever man to clever man across the decades, each one convinced he is the first to notice it. It will outlive Pratt. It attaches to the slogan the way barnacles attach to a ship, harmless, decorative, doing nothing to slow it down. Every famous phrase seems to grow one of these, a little parasite of wit that travels wherever the phrase travels. What Pratt does not understand, and never will, is that the tinier logic is part of why it lasts. A perfectly airtight sentence is forgettable. A phrase with one charming loose thread invites people to tug it, to repeat it, to explain the joke to someone who has not heard it, and every time they do, they say the slogan again, for free. The company could not have designed better advertising than a nation of Pratts, helpfully repeating the brand while trying to poke a hole in it, so you let him have his moment. You nod, you allow that it is a fair point, and you watch him glow with the satisfaction of the misunderstood genius. Then everyone finishes their coffee, right down to the bottom of the cup, the good part and the allegedly mediocre parts alike, and nobody leaves a drop. The slogan, whatever its grammar, turns out to be accurate. You drank it all. It was, in fact, good the whole way down. You are a Jewish housewife in the 1920s, and every spring you take the coffee down off the shelf and put it away, because Passover is coming and you are not certain the coffee is allowed. The rules about what you can eat during the holiday are old and careful, and somewhere in them is a category of forbidden things that includes beans. Coffee comes in beans. So, to be safe, you go without for a whole week every year, and you are far from the only household on the block doing exactly the same thing. The rules are not arbitrary, and you do not treat them as an inconvenience. For 8 days you clear the house of anything leavened, you bring out the special dishes, you keep a kitchen that would satisfy your grandmother and her grandmother before her. Within that careful world there is a category the tradition calls kitniot, a group of foods that includes beans and legumes, set aside during the holiday. A serious matter, kept seriously, and you are not about to guess your way through it. And so you arrive at coffee, and coffee presents a small, genuine puzzle. The thing is called a bean. It looks like a bean. The thing is sold, roasted, and ground like a hard little legume, and nothing about the word on the can suggests otherwise. Nobody has stood up and settled the question for you plainly, so you do the responsible thing, which is the cautious thing. When in doubt, you leave it out. For a week, the coffee sits in the back of the cupboard like a guest who has been asked politely to wait outside. The cost of this caution is not small, though it is quiet. Passover is a week of early mornings and long preparations, of cooking and cleaning and hosting, exactly the week a person most wants a hot cup of coffee to lean on. And that is precisely the week you deny yourself, on principle, out of an abundance of care. You move through the holiday a little foggier than usual, a little slower to start, running the whole marathon of it on tea and willpower and the memory of caffeine. You are not alone in this, which is the part a coffee company will eventually find very interesting. Up and down your street, in kitchen after kitchen, the same cans are going quietly into the same cupboards for the same careful week. Call it a city-wide boycott that nobody organised and nobody intended, A mass of devout households all independently deciding that the safe answer is no coffee. Multiply your one cupboard by every observant family in the country, scholars who have a hole in the calendar shaped exactly like a week of unsold coffee. What makes it almost funny, in hindsight, is how little it would take to fix. The question of whether the coffee bean is truly a bean is not actually unanswerable. It is just unanswered, floating in the space where nobody with authority has bothered to look closely and rule. In the absence of a clear yes, caution supplies a standing no, year after year, spring after spring, and the coffee waits in the dark for a verdict that keeps not arriving. You would welcome the verdict, honestly. You are not attached to going without. You keep the tradition carefully because you take it seriously, not because you enjoy a foggy holiday, and if someone whose judgment you trusted told you plainly that coffee was fine, you would have it back on the table by morning. The caution is a placeholder, not a preference, and you have kept it a long time. So the cupboard stays shut for the week, and the tea goes cold, and the whole devout half of the city runs its most demanding holiday on less caffeine than any week of the year. Somewhere, a clever advertising man is about to notice all those closed cupboards and see, where you see a small annual sacrifice, an enormous unanswered question with a fortune resting on the answer. The bean is waiting. So, though you do not know it, are you? You are an advertising man named Joseph Jacobs, and you have noticed a problem that is also an opportunity, which is your favorite kind. A great many families stop buying coffee for a week every spring over a question nobody has actually settled, so you go and settle it. You bring the question to a rabbi and you ask him plainly whether the coffee bean is really a bean at all. He examines it, and he tells you something that will change a company's fortunes, which is that the coffee bean is not a bean. You are good at your work, and your work is a peculiar specialty. You understand the American Jewish community as a market that the big general advertisers keep talking past, missing the specific rhythms of its calendar and its concerns. You have built a business on paying attention where others do not, and paying attention is how you notice the closed cupboards, the coffee sitting out the holiday, the quiet annual hole in a whole category of sales. Most men would see that hole and shrug, because most men assume a religious question is simply closed. You see it differently. You suspect the wall is not a wall at all, but an unopened door, a question that feels settled only because no one has bothered to ask it out loud to someone qualified to answer. So you decide to ask. Not to argue, not to bend the rules, but genuinely to find out. So you bring it to a rabbi, and you set a single roasted bean on the table between you. He picks it up, turns it once in the light, and considers the plain botanical question underneath all the confusion. Is the coffee bean a legume, one of the kitniot set aside for the holiday, or is it something else? He does what scholars do and looks at what the thing actually is rather than what it is casually called. And the answer, once someone finally examines it, is almost embarrassingly simple. The coffee bean is not a bean. It is the seed at the center of a berry, the fruit of the coffee plant. It only wears the name bean by habit. That distinction changes everything. A berry seed is not a legume, and if it is not a legume, it is not in the forbidden category at all, which means the coffee that has been sitting in the backs of cupboards every spring was permissible the whole time. The week of foggy mornings, the cold tea, the citywide accidental boycott, all of it rested on a misunderstanding of a single word. The bean was innocent. It just needed a scholar to say so plainly, and it took an advertising man to think of asking. You secure the ruling properly, with a rabbi's authority behind it, because a claim like this is worth nothing whispered and everything when it is genuine. This is not a company inventing a permission for itself. It is a real question, brought to a real authority, answered honestly, and the honesty is the whole value. If it were a trick, it would fail. Because it is true, it will hold, and families will trust it precisely because it does not ask them to bend anything they believe. And now, you are holding something remarkable, a plain, true, and profitable fact with a fortune folded inside it. The coffee is kosher for Passover. Those cupboards can open. That week of unsold coffee can become a week of sold coffee, and the families who go without every spring can have their hot cup back during the exact days they need it most. You have not manufactured demand. You have unlocked demand that was always there, penned behind a misunderstanding. Most advertising invents a reason to want something. You have done the rarer thing, which is to remove a reason not to buy. The families were never resisting the coffee. They were resisting a question mark. You replaced it with a clear answer, and now the only thing left is to tell them. You have the fact. Next, you need the messenger, and you have an idea about that too. You are in the grocery store the spring after the ruling, and something new is sitting beside the coffee display. Buy a can of Maxwell House, the sign says, and take home a book. For nothing. The book is a Haggadah, the text your family reads aloud every year at the Passover table, and here it is being handed out free with a tin of coffee. You did not come in for a book. You came in for coffee. You are leaving with both, and so is everyone else in line. The timing is not lost on you. This is the same coffee that spent years exiled to the back of the cupboard during the holiday, and now it arrives with a gift that belongs at the table. Somebody at this company has thought carefully about your spring, and it shows. The can and the book sit side by side like they were always meant to travel together, and the sign does not oversell it. Buy the coffee, take the book. That is the whole offer. You pick up the Haggadah and turn it over, prepared to be unimpressed, because free things from companies are usually cheap things from companies. But it is not cheap. It is a real Haggadah, sturdy, complete, and dignified, the kind of book you could actually set at every place around the table without apology. That detail lands. They did not print a flimsy pamphlet with an advertisement stapled to scripture. They made a good version of a book your family already needs every single year. That is the quiet brilliance of it. Most advertising interrupts you. It shouts from a page, it demands a moment you did not offer, it inserts itself between you and whatever you were doing. This does the opposite. It gives you something you genuinely want, for a holiday you keep, and asks only that you buy the coffee you are already allowed to buy. Most brands rent a minute of your attention and lose it the second the pitch ends. This one got itself quietly adopted into the family, and here is what it does to the coffee, invisibly, as you carry both home. From now on, the book and the brand are joined in your mind. Next spring, when you set the table and open the Haggadah and begin to read the oldest words your family knows, the coffee will be right there in the association, woven into the evening. You will not experience this as advertising. You will experience it as tradition. And tradition is the one form of loyalty that no discount from a rival can ever undercut. The families ahead of you in line are doing exactly what you are doing, and it has the feel of something spreading. A neighbor takes two, one for her mother. A man buys the coffee he would have bought anyway and pockets the book like luck. Nobody is being fooled. Everybody can see the coffee is buying its way onto the table, and everybody takes the book gladly anyway, because the book is good and the trade is fair and being marketed to has rarely felt this much like being cared for. What the company has understood, and what makes this different from a coupon or a jingle, is that it did not try to buy a single sale. It bought a place in an annual ritual, a spot at the table that renews itself every spring for as long as the tradition lasts, which is to say essentially forever. A sale is spent the moment it happens. A place at the Passover table pays out year after year, generation after generation, and it cost them a well-made book and a shrewd idea. So you carry your can and your Haggadah out into the spring afternoon, pleased with both, not quite aware you have joined one of the smartest things a coffee company will ever do. The book will sit on your shelf until the holiday. Then it will come to the table, and the coffee will come with it. You just wanted coffee. You are carrying home a tradition with a lid. You are sitting at the Passover table, and the book in your hands came from a coffee company. Nobody at the table finds this strange, because the book is good. The Hebrew is proper enough that the strictest relative has no complaint, and the English runs right alongside it so that the younger cousins, whose Hebrew has thinned with each generation, can follow every word. You read your part aloud from a booklet that a grocer gave your mother with a can of coffee, and the ritual holds together perfectly. The table is full, the candles are lit, and the same book sits at every place, which is itself a small, quiet gift. In years past, the table was a patchwork of mismatched Haggadahs with different page numbers, so that finding the right spot together was its own small chaos. This year, everyone holds the identical book. When your uncle calls out the page, it is the page for everyone, and the whole table turns as one. The design turns out to matter more than a free book has any right to. The Hebrew stands in its column, unaltered and correct, so that your grandfather, who notices everything and forgives little, reads it and gives the smallest nod of a man who has found nothing to object to. That nod is not easily earned. And beside the Hebrew runs the English plain, clear and modern, and this is the column that saves the evening for half the table, The cousins and the in-laws whose Hebrew is a warm memory rather than a working tool, because that is the quiet truth of your family and of a great many families like it. Each generation born in this country holds a little less of the old language than the one before, not from any failing, but from the simple drift of living somewhere new. The children can sound out the letters, but not always the sense. Without the English, they would sit through the Seder as polite spectators, mouthing along. With it, they are inside the story, reading their own lines, understanding what they say as they say it. So the book does something genuinely kind, whatever the company intended. It keeps the whole table together across the language gap that time keeps widening. The grandfather gets his authentic Hebrew. The grandchild gets an English she can actually follow, and the two of them read the same story from the same book on the same night, which is the entire point of the evening, the passing of the story down intact, from the old hands to the new ones. A coffee company, of all things, built the bridge. You glance at the small print, the quiet mark of the brand, and you feel no resentment about it, only a mild wonder. It asks nothing of the table. It does not interrupt the prayers. It sits there modestly at the edge of a sacred evening, having paid for its seat with a genuinely useful book, and in return it gets to be present, year after year, at the most important meal your family keeps. It's the most patient advertisement ever written, one that waits quietly on the table and lets the ritual do the remembering, and you will remember. That is the thing you cannot see from inside the evening, but that the company understood perfectly. Decades from now, when you are the one at the head of the table calling out the page, you will reach for this same book, or one just like it, because it is the book Passover feels like to you now. The association is being set tonight, gently, permanently. The reading goes around the table, voice after voice, Hebrew and English braided together, old and young carried by the same pages. The coffee that started all of this is somewhere in the kitchen, or already poured, entirely beside the point now. The book has outgrown its origin. It came from a grocery store, but it lives here now, in the oldest ritual your family owns, and it fits as if it had always belonged. You turn the page. Everyone turns with you. You start to notice the same little coffee book turning up in places that have nothing to do with your kitchen. A cousin in the army has one, issued to him by the service so he can hold a Seder far from home. A neighbour took one to a relative in a hospital. Decades from now, the very same booklet will be read at the White House. The book your family got free with a can of coffee has quietly become the most widely used version of this text anywhere, and it never once announced the promotion. The cousin in uniform surprises you first. He writes home describing a Seder held far from any family kitchen, using the same familiar book the service hands out so soldiers far from home can keep the holiday. The army, it turns out, has been issuing this coffee company's Haggadah to its Jewish soldiers for years, which means the book has followed young men to bases and battlefields, a small piece of home printed on cheap paper and carried in a duffel. Once you start seeing it, you see it everywhere. The senior centre where an aunt spends her days, the schoolroom, where children learn the order of the evening, the hospital bedside, the prison, the base overseas. Wherever a person needs to keep the holiday and has only what someone can hand them, there it is. The book goes where people go, into every kind of room, asking nothing, fitting everywhere. The numbers, when you finally hear them, do not sound real. Tens of millions of copies, printed and given away over the years, more than 50 million, and still counting, until this humble giveaway is described, plainly and accurately, as the most widely used Haggadah in the world. Not one of the most. A book that began as a way to sell coffee during a slow week has become the single most common version of an ancient text on the entire planet, and it happened without fanfare, one can at a time. Something almost comic hides in the scale of it, if you hold it the right way. Companies spend fortunes trying to be remembered for a season, to buy a slogan people repeat for a year or two before forgetting. This company gave away a good book and accidentally embedded itself in a ritual thousands of years old, on tables in every state, in the army, in the White House itself. It is basically the most successful marketing campaign imaginable, and its genius was to stop looking like marketing the moment it left the store. And the reason it spread is not clever at all. The book is good and free and genuinely useful, and useful things travel on their own power. Nobody carried this Haggadah to a barracks or a hospital because a company asked them to. They carried it because it worked. Because when someone needed a Haggadah, the answer was already on a shelf, printed and ready. The company made enough of a good thing and let need do the distributing. What gets you is the humility built into the arrangement. The brand never crowds the sacred words. It sits at the edge, modest, quiet, and unassuming, and lets the text be the text. It could have splashed itself across every page. Instead it whispered, once, in small print, and trusted that a good deed done quietly would be remembered longer than a loud one. The quiet is exactly why nobody minds. So the little book keeps going, out past your kitchen, past your street, past anything the coffee company could have mapped when it printed the first run. It rides in duffels and sits at bedsides and lies open on the most watched table in the country. Somewhere in all of it, in tiny letters nobody reads aloud, is the name of a coffee. Keeping quiet, keeping its seat. The promotion never ended. It just stopped looking like one, and became, instead, simply the book, good to the last drop, and then some. You are Joel Cheek in 1928, and you are about to sell the thing you spent your life building. The offer on the table is enormous, a reported $42 million, a number so large it stops meaning anything past a certain point. You started with a paper twist of green beans and a horse and a nose you had to train yourself. Now a company built on breakfast cereal wants to buy your coffee, and you are old enough to know a good exit when you see one. So you take the pen. $42 million is not a sum a former schoolteacher from Burkesville, Kentucky, was ever supposed to see written next to his name. You do the arithmetic, and then you stop, because past a certain point, the figure detaches from anything you can picture. It is more money than the farm you grew up on could have produced in 1,000 years. It's the kind of number that does not buy things so much as end the question of whether you can buy things for you and your children and theirs. And it came from coffee, from the barrel you resented, the skillet you watched people struggle over, the sour, scorched, and watery cups at the inns on your sales route. You looked at a thing everyone bought badly and you fixed it, and the fixing turned into this. The whole arc of a life folded into one signature. The buyer is the Postum Company, which is a strange sort of poetry. Postum made its name selling a coffee substitute, a drink for people who wanted to avoid coffee, and now the same company is spending a fortune to own the most famous real coffee in the country. The people who built their business on avoiding your product have concluded the smarter move is simply to buy it outright. You would find it funnier if you were not busy becoming very rich. Selling means letting go, the question every founder faces at the pen. The coffee will go on without you, run by men in a distant office who never rode a sales route, never trained a nose, never handed a hotel 20 free pounds, and gone home to sweat it out. They will own the name you borrowed from a hotel and the slogan and the whole machine, and your relationship to it will change from father to former owner in the time it takes to sign. But you are 75 years old, and 75 has a clarity that 35 does not. You are not going to run this company into the far future. Someone will inherit it either way, and the honest question is not whether to let go but how, and on what terms, and for how much. A fortune now, secured, with the brand handed to a giant that can carry it further than you ever could, is not a defeat. It is the cleanest possible landing for a thing you have flown as far as one man's lifetime allows. So, you sign. And in the signing you convert a coffee company into a family fortune that will outlast you by generations. The money will build houses and gardens and lives you will not be alive to see. And the brand, freed from you, will grow larger than a Nashville man on a horse could have imagined, sold in every state, advertised on machines not yet invented, poured into millions of cups by people who will never know your name. You gave it a name once. Now, you give it away. You set down the pen. Somewhere a company you built with your own trained nose stops being yours and becomes a line in a giant's ledger, and somewhere else, at the same instant, a Kentucky farm boy becomes one of the wealthy men of his age. Both things are true and both happen in the same quiet moment. The coffee will be everywhere. You just will not be the one carrying it there anymore. You built it by hand, and now you are a very rich stranger to your own coffee. You are the coffee now, or you might as well be, because you have just become one brand inside an enormous machine. The company that bought you renames itself General Foods and keeps buying, gathering famous names the way some people gather stamps. Your coffee is no longer a Nashville concern run by a man on a horse. It is a line item, a crown jewel in a portfolio, advertised nationally and managed by people who have never smelled a roasting drum. The coffee tastes the same. Everything around it has changed. The new company does not think in cans the way Cheek did. It thinks in categories, in shelves, in the whole grocery store at once. Cereal here, coffee there, gelatin over there, a growing collection of the most recognized names in the American pantry, all owned by the same distant board. Maxwell House is now filed among them, a famous name in a drawer full of famous names, managed the way you would manage a valuable painting you never intend to look at closely. What is strange is how little the coffee itself notices. In the roasting plant, the drums still turn, the beans still go in pale and come out dark. The vacuum machine still pulls the air from every can with the same indifferent hiss. The workers on the floor do the same work they did last year. From the height of the roaster, nothing has happened at all. The change is entirely above them, in the offices and the ledgers, in whose name is on the top of the paperwork, which is the one place the coffee cannot smell. But the change is real, even if the coffee cannot taste it. A brand run by its founder is run by a man who is proud, particular, and invested, who remembers the horse, the failed blends, and the sweat of waiting. A brand run by a conglomerate is run by strategy, by market share, by the cool arithmetic of a portfolio deciding how much attention each name deserves this quarter. It is what happens when a beloved family diner is bought by a national chain. The recipe survives, and the soul quietly files for a transfer. The dish can be identical. The keeping of it is not. There are things the giant does far better, and honesty requires admitting them. General Foods can advertise on a scale Cheek never dreamed of, put the name in front of the entire country at once, ship the cans to every corner of a continent, and fund the research that will one day pull instant coffee out of a jar for millions. A small company loves its product. A giant can carry it. Maxwell House is about to go places a Nashville firm could never have reached, precisely because it is no longer a Nashville firm, and there are things that quietly slip away, too small to appear on any balance sheet. The particular pride of a man who could taste the difference himself. The intimacy of a company where the founder knew the roast by its smell. The soul of the thing does not vanish. It just stops being the point, next to the market share. This is the fate of nearly every good small thing that grows large enough to matter. It gets bought, folded into something bigger, and trades the warmth of being somebody's whole life for the reach of being everybody's ordinary choice. It is a real trade with real gains, but it is not pure gain either. Something specific and human quietly steps out of the room the moment the founder sets down the pen. So the coffee goes on, richer, bigger, further, poured into more cups than ever before, carried by a machine that will make it a household name in every household in the land. Joel Cheek, comfortably wealthy, will even keep appearing in its advertisements, a familiar face lending the giant a little of the warmth it bought. The name endures. The reach explodes. And somewhere underneath it all, the man on the horse recedes into a story, told shorter every year, on the back of a can that nobody ever reads. You are Leslie Cheek, and you have a share of a coffee fortune and no idea yet what a house can cost when there is no reason to stop. You and your wife Mabel hire a celebrated New York architect and you do not ask him for a house. You ask him for an estate, a mansion and its gardens designed as one thing. 36 rooms across 30,000 square feet of limestone. You name it by joining your family name to hers. Every hedge, every hall, every window is, in the end, coffee. The timing is its own kind of luck, or foresight, or both. The family holdings were converted into stock in the great company that bought the coffee, and the money is there, real and enormous, at the exact moment you decide to build. So you build the way people build only when the question of cost has quietly left the room. Not a large house, an estate, a thing designed from the ground up to be looked at, walked through, and remembered. The physical form of a fortune that came out of 10 million ordinary mornings. The architect you hire is a man named Bryant Fleming, and you give him the rarest brief an architect ever receives, which is essentially everything. Design the house, design the gardens. Design how the one flows into the other, so that there is no seam between the built and the grown, the mansion sitting in its landscape as though it had risen there naturally. Fleming, handed that kind of freedom and that kind of budget, does what any artist does with both. He makes something that will still be drawing crowds a century later. What rises is a Georgian mansion of pale limestone, formal and symmetrical and serene, 36 rooms of it, spread across a footprint that a normal house could hide inside several times over. One wing alone could rent itself out as a small hotel. There are gardens laid out in careful geometry, terraces and pools and long green vistas, boxwood clipped into order, the whole thing composed like a painting you can walk through. It's a small European estate transplanted onto a Tennessee hillside, and it works, because enough money and talent can transplant almost anything. You name it, Cheekwood, folding your family name into Mabel's maiden name, Wood, so that the estate carries both of you in a single word. A fitting kind of vanity, the naming, because the whole place is in some sense a portrait of the marriage and the fortune together. Her name and yours, joined and carved into the identity of a house that will outlast you both by generations. People will say the name for 100 years without knowing it is two families stitched together over morning coffee. And here is the quiet arithmetic underneath all of it, the fact that gives the gardens their strange weight. Every stone of this place was paid for by coffee. Not by inheritance from old land, not by industry or oil or railroads, but by a bean that a relative learned to blend and sell. All those cups, all those cans hissing open in all those kitchens, all those ordinary people spooning grounds into percolators, converted at last, through the machinery of a fortune, into limestone and boxwood on a Tennessee hill. The mansion is coffee. It is just coffee that stopped being liquid. Trace it back and it turns almost dizzying. A woman in Memphis opens a can. A soldier stirs a spoonful in a mess tent. A family sets it on the Passover table. Each of them adds a few coins to a river that flows eventually uphill, and pools here, in these halls, in these gardens. Decades from now, the family will not keep it, and Cheekwood will become a public garden and museum, open to anyone who wants to walk its terraces. A place built by millions of ordinary cups will be handed back to ordinary people, who will stroll the gardens on a Sunday never guessing that the ground under their feet was paid for, drop, by coffee. You are Joel Cheek in your old age, and your own face has become part of the sales pitch. The company puts you in the advertisements, a white-bearded patriarch vouching for the coffee, the very picture of a trustworthy grandfather. There is a joke buried in the image that only you fully appreciate. You have never in your life had a drink of alcohol. You have never smoked. The single stimulant you ever allowed yourself is the one you turned into a fortune, and here you are, at 80, still recommending it by name. The company knows exactly what it is doing by putting you in the frame. A brand owned by a faceless conglomerate needs a face, and yours is a good one, aged, bearded, and kindly. The founder himself, the man who started it all with a blend and a hotel. You lend the giant something it cannot manufacture, which is the warmth of a real human origin. People trust a grandfather more than they trust a corporation, and you are, conveniently, an actual grandfather several times over. But you are the one who gets the private joke, and you savor it quietly. Here is a man who ordered his whole life around restraint, a Christian and a prohibitionist who considered alcohol a genuine evil and tobacco a foolishness, who denied himself the ordinary vices as a matter of settled principle. And the one thing he permitted himself, the single indulgence he never gave up, was coffee, not despite the caffeine, because of it. It was his one allowed pleasure, and he built an empire on it. Think about the shape of that. Most fortunes of the era were made on things a preacher would frown at, on whiskey or beer or tobacco, on the very appetites you spent your life warning against. Yours was made on the one stimulant respectable enough to serve a preacher. It is basically the teetotaler's revenge, an empire of respectable caffeine built by a man who would not touch a drop of anything stronger. And there is a tidiness to it that pleases the part of you that has always liked things orderly. You did not compromise your principles to get rich. You did not hold your nose and sell something you disapproved of. You sold the exact substance you loved and permitted and drank yourself every morning with a clear conscience all your long life. The product and the man match perfectly. The grandfather in the advertisement is not acting. He really does think the coffee is good, and he really has never wanted anything stronger. So you sit for the advertisements, and you let the company use your face, and you understand that you have become, in your old age, a kind of living label. The white beard says heritage, the kind eyes say trust, and underneath it all sits the quiet fact that this is the honest one, the one endorsement in all of advertising that requires no pretending. You are the original brand ambassador, and a hopeless one by modern standards, being genuinely, fireably sincere about the product. You are 83 when you go, in Florida, in the winter of 1935, an old man who started as a schoolteacher in Burkesville and ended as a face on a coffee advertisement and a name on a fortune. You appeared in those ads nearly to the end, the founder vouching for his own creation, honest right down to the last frame. A strange immortality, being a brand's grandfather, your face outliving your body on cans and in magazines, quietly reassuring strangers for years after you are gone. And the joke goes with you, mostly untold, because who would you even tell? That the great respectable coffee fortune of the age belonged to a man who never drank, never smoked, and treated a hot cup as his one earthly indulgence. The country will pour your coffee for another 100 years without ever quite noticing that its most famous morning drink was built by a man of near total abstinence who made a single permitted bean his whole life's work. You go to the grocery store in late 1942 and discover that coffee now comes with a limit. The country is at war, and coffee has become something the government counts. A week before the rule takes effect, the shelves are stripped bare by everyone doing exactly what you are doing, which is quietly panicking. Now there is a system, £1 per adult, and only every few weeks, and you do the arithmetic in your head right there in the aisle and realize it's not going to be enough. It starts, as these things do, with a rumour and then an announcement. Coffee is to be rationed, beginning at the end of November. And in the week before the rule arrives, the entire country performs the same undignified scramble, descending on the stores to buy every can they can carry before the limit clamps down. You arrive to find the coffee aisle looking like the aftermath of a very polite riot, picked clean by your neighbours, who are no more ashamed of it than you are. The reason behind it is grimmer than a shortage of beans. The coffee is out there, growing in Latin America same as always, but getting it here has become dangerous. German submarines are hunting the cargo ships in the Atlantic, and the cargo space that survives is needed for the war, for men and machines and the 1,000 things an army eats besides coffee. So the ships that once carried your morning cup now carry other things, or lie on the ocean floor, and the coffee simply cannot make the crossing in the numbers it used to. So the government does the math a nation does in wartime and turns it into a rule. Every adult over the age of 15 may have £1 of coffee every 5 weeks, and that is the whole allowance, stamped, tracked, and enforced. You stand in the aisle and translate the rule into cups. A pound is approximately 40 honest cups. 5 weeks is a long stretch of mornings. The two numbers do not get along, and the disagreement between them is going to be living in your kitchen for the duration of the war. £1 every 5 weeks is, when you work it out, a genuinely tight ration, less than the coffee you are used to by a wide margin. You had 2 cups a morning without thinking about it, the way a person has air. Now you are being asked to run your household on a fraction of that, to make a pound stretch across 35 days of early risings and long afternoons. It amounts to being told that your most reliable daily comfort is now a rationed luxury, and you had better learn to sip. And the strange part is how much it stings for something so small. There is a war on, men are dying, whole cities are being flattened, and here you are, rattled by a limit on coffee, and you feel it anyway. Because coffee is not really about coffee. It is the fixed point of the morning, the thing that turns you from a sleeping body into a functioning person, and having it rationed means the war has reached all the way into your kitchen, into the very first minutes of your day. You learn quickly that everyone feels it and nobody says much, because complaining about coffee while soldiers ship out feels indecent, so the grumbling goes quiet and practical instead. The whole street is engaged in the same small daily campaign, stretching a rationed pound across too many mornings, fighting a tiny domestic version of the shortage with spoons and ingenuity and mild martyrdom. So you buy your allotted pound and carry it home like something precious, because for the duration it is. The war will take larger things from many people. From you, this week, it is taking the easy abundance of your morning cup and replacing it with arithmetic. A pound, and 5 weeks, and a household that drinks more than the math allows. You set the can on the shelf. You are going to have to make it last. You are trying to stretch £1 of coffee across 6 weeks, and it is teaching you things about yourself. By early 1943, the ration has tightened, and a pound every 6 weeks works out to less than a single cup a day for a household that used to drink 2. So, you get inventive. You brew the grounds a second time, weaker. You measure with a careful spoon instead of a generous hand. You learn exactly how thin a cup of coffee can get before it stops being coffee, and you drink it right up to that line. The tightening comes in the new year, and it is a real one. What was a pound every 5 weeks becomes a pound every 6, and that single extra week of stretching pushes the whole household math from tight into genuinely lean. You sit down and work it out honestly, and the number that comes back is less than a cup a day per person in a house that never used to count cups at all. The ration has gone from a nuisance to a discipline, and discipline is exactly what it will now require. So you become, out of necessity, a careful scientist of the coffee spoon. The generous heaped scoop of peacetime is gone, replaced by a level spoon measured with the attention of a pharmacist. You know now, to the granule, how much it takes to make a pot that still tastes like something, because exceeding it in week 2 means going without in week 6. Every morning is a small negotiation between the coffee you want and the coffee the calendar allows. Then comes the second brewing, the little indignity everyone quietly practices and nobody quite admits. You do not throw out the used grounds. You keep them and you run water through them again, and the result is a pale, thin, and apologetic cup, coffee's ghost rather than coffee, but warm and faintly bitter and better than nothing. It is like wringing a washcloth that is already mostly dry, and you do it anyway, because in a rationed kitchen even the ghost of a cup has value. You learn the whole vocabulary of stretching, and so does everyone else. Chicory, the roasted root that bulks out the grounds and lends a woody bitterness that is not quite coffee but stands in for it, reheating yesterday's pot rather than wasting a drop. None of it is good, exactly. All of it is what you do when the thing you rely on is doled out by the ounce and the war shows no sign of ending on your schedule. And you discover the exact edge, the line past which a cup stops being coffee and becomes brown water with ambitions. You ride right up against that line every day now, brewing as weak as you can bear, because weak coffee that lasts beats strong coffee that runs out. You have developed a tolerance for thinness you would have found insulting 3 years ago. Standards are the first thing rationing takes and the last it gives back. There is a grim little pride in it, though, the pride of a household making do. You are not going without entirely, not quite, and the not quite is an achievement, wrung out of careful spoons and second brewings, and a war's worth of small ingenuities. Every morning that you produce a cup, however thin, is a morning you have outmaneuvered the shortage. It is just competence, the daily competence of a family that has learned to make a little go a long way. So you drink your pale ration, cup by cup, and you make the pound last its full 6 weeks through sheer attention, and you do it again the next month, and the next, for as long as the war asks. The abundance will come back someday, the heaped spoon, the fresh grounds, the second cup poured without a thought. But you will remember this. You will remember exactly how thin a cup can get and still count, and you will never again pour a full, strong cup without some small part of you marvelling that you are allowed. You are a soldier a long way from any kitchen, and your coffee comes as a powder in a small packet. There is no pot, no percolator, no stove. There is your canteen cup, some water that may or may not be hot, and a spoonful of instant coffee that the army has decided is worth shipping to you across an ocean, while civilians back home go without. You stir it in, you drink it fast, and you get more caffeine into a fighting man in 10 seconds than a whole morning ritual ever managed. The packet is in your ration, tucked among the other small brown miracles of army feeding, and it is the one you reach for first. The K ration gives you a little soluble coffee at breakfast, a folded packet no bigger than a stamp, and the C ration delivers powdered coffee too, and you have come to regard these packets with a loyalty you did not know you could feel toward a chemical. Back home, coffee was comfort. Out here it is closer to equipment, standard issue, as necessary as socks. The making of it is the crudest coffee ceremony ever devised, and you have grown fond of it precisely for that. Powder into the canteen cup, water, if you can heat it, though on a bad day, it goes in cold and you drink it anyway, a stir with whatever is at hand. And there it is, coffee, of a sort, produced in the time it takes to describe it, no skillet, no grinder, no percolator, none of the machinery that took your mother 20 smoky minutes. It is basically the whole history of the morning cup compressed into one spoonful and one stir. And the strange thing, the thing you will try to explain later and fail, is how much it matters. A hot cup out here is not really about the caffeine, though the caffeine helps. It is a minute of home in a place that has none, a familiar warmth wrapped around your cold hands in the dark before whatever the day holds. Men who agree on nothing else agree on the coffee. It's the one civilian comfort the war did not manage to leave behind, and it turns out to be the one that travels lightest. The reason you have it and your family does not is a matter of grim priority. The instant coffee, the soluble powder, is light, durable, and instant. Exactly the kind of coffee an army needs, because it weighs nothing, keeps forever, and brews anywhere without a fire. So the military claims it, in quantities that stagger. In a single year, the armed forces buy over 1 million cases of the stuff, essentially the entire output of an American plant, the whole national supply of instant coffee diverted into packets bound for men in foxholes. The powder that seemed a novelty at home has become a weapon of morale. Before the war, instant coffee was a curiosity, a slightly disreputable shortcut that serious coffee drinkers looked down on. The war ends that snobbery in the most direct way possible, by handing the powder to millions of young men and giving them no alternative. You did not choose instant coffee. It chose you, standard issue, and you drank it every day for the duration until it stopped being a shortcut and became, simply, what coffee is. A whole generation is being retrained, one packet at a time, without anyone deciding to do it on purpose. And somewhere in the drinking of all those packets, a habit is forming that will outlast the war by decades. You are learning coffee as a fast thing, a powder and a stir, a spoonful of instant in a hurry, and you are learning it so thoroughly that your hands will do it this way for the rest of your life. The percolator on your mother's stove is becoming a memory. The packet in your ration is becoming the future. You just do not know it yet, out here blowing on a canteen cup in the dark, drinking the war's coffee before the light comes. You come home from the war having learnt to make coffee the fast way, and the fast way comes with you. For years, the only coffee you knew was a spoon of powder in hot water, made in a hurry, and now that is simply how your hands do it. Your wife has a percolator and opinions about it. You have a jar of instant and a shrug. The kitchen becomes a small negotiation between two eras of coffee, and the powder, being easier, keeps winning more mornings than anyone quite intends. Your wife, who kept the home fires and the percolator burning through the whole thing, regards the jar of instant with polite suspicion. She spent the war stretching a rationed pound of real coffee across careful spoons and second brewings, treating every ounce as precious, and here you are treating coffee as something you dissolve. To her, coffee is the percolator, the grounds, the smell, the small ceremony of a pot coming to life on the stove. To you, it is a spoon and a stir. You are both right. You are also not going to agree. So the mornings become a quiet contest between two ideas of what coffee is. Some days the percolator wins, and the kitchen fills with the old smell, and she is vindicated. Other days you are in a hurry, or tired, or simply pulled by the deep habit, and the jar wins, a spoonful dissolved in a cup while the percolator sits cold. It is a small domestic tug-of-war between the ritual and the shortcut has time and tiredness on its side, which are powerful allies in any household. The coffee companies are watching this exact contest play out in millions of kitchens, and they have chosen a side because there is money in the side you are on. In 1946, with the war behind it, Maxwell House brings out an instant coffee for civilians, and it lands on a country full of men who spent years drinking exactly that. The company is not creating a taste. It is meeting a taste the war already built, a whole generation pre-trained to accept a spoonful of powder as an ordinary cup. The market was manufactured overseas, in ration packets, at government expense. And it works because convenience almost always works, given enough tiredness. The jar sits ready on the shelf, fast, simple and forgiving, no grounds to measure, no pot to tend, no clean up beyond a spoon. For a country moving fast into a busy post-war decade, that ease is not a small thing. The percolator asks for attention the modern morning increasingly does not have to give. The jar asks for 10 seconds, which is basically Instacart for a substance you already own. Multiply that trade across millions of hurried kitchens and you can watch, in real time, the shortcut quietly winning the country, one rushed morning at a time. Something is gained and something is lost, the way it always is with convenience. And you feel both. Gained, time, ease, a couple of seconds on a morning that has no minutes to spare. Lost. The smell of a pot coming to life, the small ceremony that gave the morning a shape, the ritual your wife defends because she knows, correctly, that a ritual is worth more than the minutes it costs. You drink the fast cup and you miss the slow one, and you drink the fast cup anyway. This is how a habit forged in a foxhole reshapes a nation's kitchens without a single person deciding it should. Not by force, not by advertising alone, but by millions of tired men reaching, each morning, for the easy thing their hands already know. The percolator will hold on for years yet, defended by the wives and the purists and everyone who believes coffee should cost a little effort. But the jar has arrived, and the jar is patient, and the jar has an entire generation already trained to reach for it before the pot could even finish its first perk. You make coffee in a percolator, which means you make coffee you can watch. You fill the base with water, you spoon grounds into the little basket, you set it on the stove, and then you wait for the show to start. Because a percolator performs, coffee climbs up the central stem and bursts up into a small glass dome on the lid, over and over. A bubbling little fountain that tells you exactly how the coffee is coming along. You learn to read the colour in that dome the way other people read a clock. The genius of the thing is that it shows its work. Most cooking hides inside a pot, mysterious until you lift the lid and hope. The percolator refuses that secrecy. It puts a little glass window right on top, and through it you watch the water go up clear, then faintly tan, then amber, then a deep, steady brown. Each burst into the dome a progress report you can see from across the kitchen. The percolator narrates itself, and once you have used one, a silent pot feels almost rude. The sound is the other half of it, the part that fills the kitchen before the smell does. Perk. A pause. Perk. The rhythm starts slow, tentative, one burst every few seconds, and then it finds its pace as the water heats, quickening into a steady, bubbling patter that means the coffee is truly working now. You do not need to stand over it. You can be across the room, half-dressed, chasing a child, and your ear tracks the perk without your mind having to bother, the way you track a familiar heartbeat. You learn to read the dome so well it becomes instinct. Too pale still, give it time. That perfect steady brown, pull it now, before it goes bitter. Every percolator household develops this private literacy, an eye for the exact shade that means done, passed down and argued over, one person swearing by a darker dome and another certain that way lies ruin. A small daily skill, unglamorous and real, the reading of coffee through a glass knob, and you are good at it because you have done it 10,000 times. There is a danger in the watching, of course, which is that a percolator will happily ruin coffee if you let it. Leave it perking too long, chasing an ever darker dome, and it boils the coffee over and over through the same grounds until the cup turns bitter, flat, and burnt, all the brightness cooked out of it. The pot does not stop itself. It will perk cheerfully toward disaster if you walk away, which is the percolator's one flaw, and the reason the good cup belongs to the person who knows exactly when to intervene. What the percolator gives you, in exchange for that attention, is a morning with a shape. The fill, the spoon, the weight, the perk, the reading of the dome, the pour, all of it a small ceremony that turns making coffee into an event rather than a chore. It costs a few minutes, the instant jar does not, but it fills those minutes with something. A familiar sound and a watched colour and the smell rising as it works, and a household that keeps a percolator is a household that has decided the ceremony is worth the minutes. And it is this pot, bubbling and narrating and filling the kitchen with its patient perk, that the coffee companies are about to fall in love with. Because a percolator is not just a way to make coffee. It is a picture, a sound, a rhythm, a whole little performance that happens on millions of stoves every single morning. Somebody in an advertising office is about to look at that bubbling dome and that steady perk and see not a coffee pot but a jingle waiting to happen. You are sitting in front of the television in the early 1960s, and a coffee commercial is teaching you a rhythm you will never lose. On the screen, a percolator bubbles, and a tune bubbles along with it. The music timed to the perk of the pot so exactly that the sound of coffee becomes a piece of pop music. Perk, perk, perk. You are not really watching an advertisement. You are being handed an earworm, and it is doing its job, because tomorrow morning your own pot will sound like a song. The idea is so simple it feels inevitable once you have seen it. Everyone already owns a percolator. Everyone already knows the perk, that steady bubbling patter that fills the kitchen each morning. So the advertisement does not invent a sound. It borrows the one already living in your house, sets a melody to it, and hands the whole thing back to you so that the coffee's own rhythm becomes the brand's signature. It turns your kitchen into a jingle you were already humming without knowing the words. On the screen, the pot does its little dance, the coffee climbing and bursting in time, and the music rises with each perk until the two are inseparable. You cannot tell anymore where the pot ends and the tune begins. That is the trick. And it is a good one. The sound you hear every single morning, the most ordinary sound in the house, has just been welded to a brand name, so that from now on the perk of any pot will carry a faint melody and a faint suggestion of which coffee ought to be inside it, and it lodges. That is the thing about a jingle built on a sound you already live with. It does not stay on the television where you found it. It follows you into the kitchen, because the kitchen is full of the very sound the jingle is made of, and every morning your own percolator quietly plays the opening bars. You catch yourself humming it over the stove. Your children catch it from you. It spreads through the house on the back of a sound that was always there, a melody riding a rhythm you cannot switch off without giving up coffee entirely. The rhythm turns out to be catchier than anyone bargained for. A perking pot has a real beat, insistent, steady, and hypnotic, and set to music it becomes the kind of thing that burrows in and refuses to leave. People find themselves tapping it. It escapes the commercial break and turns up in ordinary life, hummed in the grocery line, drummed on a steering wheel, a piece of advertising that has slipped its leash and becomes simply a tune the country knows, whether or not anyone remembers where they caught it. Advertising does not get more quietly total than this, and you are living inside it without resistance, because there is nothing to resist. Nobody is shouting at you. Nobody is listing features or making claims you have to weigh. They have simply taken the sound of your own morning and made it sing, so that the brand is no longer something you are told about, but something you perform yourself daily, at your own stove, in the bubbling of your own pot. It's the friendliest possible invasion, and you barely notice it happen. Decades on, long after the percolator itself fades from most kitchens, the rhythm will still be lodged in the memory of everyone who watched television in these years. They will not remember the exact words. They will remember the perk, the bubble, the beat, the feeling of a morning with a coffee pot singing on the stove. A sound became a song, became a memory, and the brand rode all three, quietly, into the permanent furniture of a generation's mind. You're hosting the neighborhood women for coffee, and the coffee is only half the point. They arrive mid-morning, they settle around your kitchen table, and the pot goes on, and what actually happens over the next hour has more to do with information than caffeine. Who is expecting? Who is struggling? Whose husband got the promotion? The coffee is the reason to gather and the thing that keeps everyone's hands busy, and you refill the cup steadily because a full cup is a promise that nobody has to leave yet. The gathering has a name, the coffee clatch, and it runs on rules nobody wrote down. It happens after the men are at work and the older children are at school, in the soft, empty middle of the morning that belongs, for these few hours, entirely to the women of the street. You host it in turn, you and your neighbours, the location rotating kitchen to kitchen, and whoever hosts provides the coffee and something to go with it, and everyone understands the arrangement without a word. Mrs. Dolan arrives first, always, because Mrs. Dolan considers punctuality a form of intelligence gathering and likes to be seated before the good chairs are taken. She sets her purse on the floor, folds her hands on the table, and waits with the patient, watchful, and unhurried alertness of a woman who has come to listen and be listened to. She knows, roughly, what everyone at this table will say before they say it, and she is usually right, and being right is a pleasure she rations out carefully so as not to seem smug. The coffee itself does real work, more than anyone credits. It gives the hands something to do, which frees the mouths, because it is far easier to say a hard thing while stirring a cup than while sitting empty-handed under everyone's eyes. It fills the pauses. It marks the time. And it renews the invitation to stay, refill after refill, so that a conversation that might have ended politely after 15 minutes stretches, on the strength of a fresh pot, into the real hour where the actual talking finally starts. Because the first half hour is never the point. The first half hour is weather and recipes and the safe surface of things, the warm-up. Only after the second cup, when the pot has been refilled and everyone has settled and the initial politeness has worn smooth, does the table turn to what it came for. A worry admitted, a marriage discussed sideways, A neighbour absent today, and therefore, briefly, the subject. Someone sets her cup down a little too carefully and mentions, to nobody in particular, that things at home have been quiet lately. The table hears the word quiet and knows exactly what it means, and another cup is filled before anyone has to answer. The coffee has to keep flowing for that turn to happen, and you keep it flowing because you are the host and the host tends the fire. It is, when you step back, the neighbourhood's real communication system, running on a percolator and a plate of something sweet. Long before anyone would think to call it a network, this is how the street actually knows itself, how trouble gets noticed and help gets quietly arranged and reputations get made and unmade over refills. The men have their own channels, at work, at the bar. This one is the women's, held in kitchens, powered by coffee, and it is, if anything, the better informed of the two. So you keep the pot going, and you watch the morning do its work, the talk deepening cup by cup missus. Dolan filing everything away behind her folded hands, the street's news moving around your table in the particular shorthand of women who have known each other for years. The coffee will be gone by noon, and so will they, back to their own kitchens, carrying what they learned. You will host again in a few weeks. The pot will go on again, and the street will know itself a little better, one refill at a time. You slide onto a stool at a diner counter, and before you have said a word, coffee appears. This is the deal here, understood by everyone, and printed nowhere. The cup is a nickel, more or less, and the refills are a promise, and the waitress comes by with the pot on a loop that never quite ends. You can sit for an hour on one order and she will keep topping you up, because the coffee is not really what you are paying for. You are paying for the stool and the warmth and the right to stay. The coffee arriving unasked is the whole grammar of the place. You do not order it the way you order eggs. You sit, and it comes, poured by a waitress who read your intention the moment you cross the threshold, because a person who sits at a counter wants coffee the way a person who sits in a barber's chair wants a haircut. It is the default, the baseline, the thing the counter assumes about you, and being assumed correctly is its own small comfort on a hard morning. The waitress is named Dot, and she runs the counter with a pot in one hand and the whole room in her head. She knows who takes it black and who needs the cream slid over without asking. She knows who is nursing the cup to make the morning last and who is in a hurry, and she paces her rounds accordingly, appearing at your elbow with the pot at the exact moment your cup drops below half, topping it without a word approximately 11 times before you have finished a single thought. She never seems to hurry, she never seems to stop. The bottomless refill is the counter's genius, an economics that looks like generosity and works like a hook. The coffee, cheap, plain, and endless, costs the diner almost nothing to pour, a few grounds and hot water, so the endless topping up is cheap kindness that keeps you on the stool. And a full stool is the point. You stay for the coffee, and while you stay you order the pie, the eggs, the second breakfast you did not plan on, and the diner makes its money on everything except the very thing that kept you there. It is basically a Costco free sample table, except the sample never stops coming. But the coffee buys something that is not on the menu at all, and everyone at the counter knows it. It buys belonging, for an hour, cheaply. The stool at the counter is one of the few places a person can sit alone and not be lonely, surrounded by the clatter and the talk and Dot's endless rounds, part of something warm without having to perform anything. The lingering is the product. The refill is just the permission slip that lets the lingering go on. All kinds of lives pass across that counter, and the coffee holds them all the same way. The night shift worker unwinding at dawn. The travelling salesman killing an hour, a distant descendant of the drummers who first carried coffee town to town. The old man who comes every day for the company more than the food. Dot pours for each of them off the same pot, the same bottomless nickel cup, and for the length of a refill or two they are all simply people at a counter, warmed by the same coffee, going nowhere in particular and welcome to. So you sit, and Dot circles, and the cup never quite empties, and the morning stretches comfortably around you. This is coffee's other great American role. Not the one at the family table, but the one out in the world. The public cup that lets a stranger buy an hour of warmth and belonging for the price of a nickel and a nod. You will leave eventually, a little more caffeinated and a little less alone. The stool will cool for a moment, then someone else will sit, and the coffee will appear, unasked, before a single word is spoken. You are in Nashville on Christmas night in 1961, and the grand old hotel is on fire. It starts high up, on the 4th floor, late in the evening while the city is full of quiet holiday lights. The building that survived a civil war, a staircase collapse, 7 presidents, and nearly 100 years of Nashville life is burning on the one night of the year built for staying home. By morning only, the brick shell is left standing, and the name that once meant the finest room in town now survives mostly on cans of coffee. The timing is almost too neat to be real, and you would not believe it in a story. Not an ordinary Tuesday. Christmas night, around 9:15, when the city has gone soft, warm, and inward, when the streets are quiet and the windows glow and the whole point of the evening is that everyone is safely somewhere they love. That is the night the old hotel chooses, or is chosen for it, to catch fire on its 4th floor and begin, at last, to go. And what a run it had, standing there. This was the building they called Overton's Folly, while it dragged half-built through a war, the shell the Union Army packed with prisoners, the place where a staircase came down in 1863 under too many men. It survived all of that to become the grandest hotel in Nashville, 5 stories and hundreds of rooms, host to 7 presidents and the finest dining room in the region, the very address that lent a coffee its name. Now the fire moves through all of it at once, indifferent to the difference between a chandelier and a prison memory. It takes the grand dining room where waiters once poured the famous coffee with ceremony, and the upper floors that held the prisoners, and the wide staircases and the tall windows, the whole long story burning at the same temperature. By the time the night is over, the interior is gutted, and only the outer walls remain, standing around a hollow. The shell stands for a little while after, blackened and empty, too damaged to save and too dangerous to leave, and the following year, in 1962, it comes down for good. What the war could not finish and the decades could not wear out, one Christmas fire settled in a single evening. There is a strange justice in what survives it, though, and it is worth sitting with. The building is gone, but the name is not, because 70 years earlier a coffee salesman with a trained nose asked permission to borrow it and stamp it on a tin. The hotel that lent its name to the coffee has outlived itself through the coffee, the way a person outlives themselves through a child who carries the family name. The bricks fell. The name kept walking, into every grocery store in the country, on the side of a can, and that is the quiet reversal at the heart of the whole story, laid bare on this one bright, cold night. When Cheek asked to name his coffee after the hotel was the grand thing and the coffee was the upstart borrowing its shine. Now the grand thing is ash and the upstart is everywhere, and the borrowing has run backward, so that the name means the coffee first and the vanished hotel only to those who still remember. The junior partner carried the name into the future, the senior partner burned on Christmas. So you stand in the cold and watch the old hotel go, and you feel the size of it, a century ending on a holiday in a couple of hours of flame. Somewhere warm, in 1,000 kitchens, cans bearing its name sit quietly on shelves, unaware that the building they are named for is coming down tonight. The room is gone, the name is safe. It went to live in the coffee a long time ago, and the coffee, it turns out, was the more durable of the two, good to the last surviving drop. You are shopping for coffee in the 1980s, and the can that ruled your grandmother's kitchen is now just one option among many. For most of a century, Maxwell House was simply what coffee was, the default, the safe choice, the best-selling brand in the country. Then the ground shifts under it, a rival passes it on the shelf. New shops open selling beans by the origin and drinks with Italian names, and suddenly the steady, consistent, affordable cup that once felt like progress starts to feel, to a new crowd, like the plain thing you order when you do not care. For decades, the top spot was not even a contest. From the days of the horse and the hotel straight through the war and the television years, Maxwell House was the country's best-selling coffee, the name that meant coffee the way a name can when it gets there first and stays. Leadership that long stops feeling like a position and starts feeling like a law of nature. Then a long-time rival edges ahead on the shelves, and the law of nature turns out to have been a habit all along. But it marks the end of something real. The default has been beaten, and once a default can be beaten, it is no longer a default. It is just a brand among brands, a colder place to live than the throne it held. The deeper change does not come from a rival can. It comes from a whole new idea of what coffee is for. Shops begin opening where coffee is not the fast, cheap thing you make at home, but the slow, expensive thing you go out for, pulled into small, strong drinks with names you are not legally required to pronounce correctly, and prices that would have made your grandmother sit down. Coffee stops being a grocery staple and starts being a craft. Slow, expensive, and fashionable, a small daily luxury with vocabulary attached. And against that, the humble can suffer a quiet reversal of meaning. The very thing that made Maxwell House a triumph, its consistency, its affordability, its refusal to be complicated, becomes, to the new crowd, the definition of boring. What Cheek fought to build, a cup that tastes the same every time with no fuss, gets reframed as a cup with no ambition. The can that once meant progress now means the office coffee, the thing you drink out of habit rather than passion. It did not change. The room changed around it. There is a real injustice in that. If you think about where it started, this was the brand that ended the smoky skillet and the morning gamble, that put a reliable cup in every kitchen. And now that very consistency is the sin, held against it by a culture so used to the reliable cup that it has forgotten reliability was ever hard won. You cannot stay a revolution forever. It is the oldest arc in business. The disruptor wins so completely that he becomes the establishment the next disruptor is paid to overthrow. Eventually you win, and winning makes you ordinary. The company itself, meanwhile, drifts further from the man on the horse, passed hand to hand through a series of corporate mergers, folded into ever larger conglomerates, one brand among hundreds in portfolios managed by people who have never heard of Roger Nolly Smith. The plants that roasted it start to close, one city at a time, as the giant rearranges its holdings. The coffee goes on, made and sold and drunk by the millions, steady as ever, but the story behind it recedes into a paragraph on the label that nobody reads. So you stand in the aisle in the 1980s, and you can watch a whole era gently changing its mind. The can is still there, still reliable, still good in exactly the way it always was. But the crown is gone, and the meaning has shifted, and the thing that was once the future is quietly becoming the past. It is not a fall, exactly. It is what happens to anything that stays the same while the world moves on around it. You are holding a cup of ordinary coffee, and it turns out to contain almost everything. A farm boy trained his own nose, a hotel lent its name and then burned on Christmas. A president got a quote he never said. A fortune became a mansion full of gardens. A rabbi decided a bean was really a berry, and a free book from a grocery store ended up on tables all over the world. None of it announces itself in the cup. You just drink it down, all the way to the bottom, and the bottom is where the whole story has been waiting. Hold the cup a moment longer and the layers keep surfacing. There is Joel Cheek in it, the Kentucky school teacher who climbed onto a horse and rode a whole state's worth of bad coffee until he was sure the country wanted a better cup. There is Roger Nolly Smith, sniffing green beans and naming their countries, teaching a grown man to read a language he had been drinking blind his whole life. The cup remembers them, even if you never knew their names until tonight. There is the hotel in it too, both hotels really. The grand one with its silent army of waiters and the grim half-built shell that held prisoners in a war. The building is ash now, gone one Christmas night, and yet here it is, still on the can, outliving its own bricks by carrying on in the coffee. Not a bad afterlife for a pile of burned stone. There is a slogan in it, 4 plain words a company man named Clifford Spiller found at his desk, so good that the world handed the credit to a president who really only said something about bears. You have been quoting an anonymous copywriter your whole life and calling it Roosevelt. The cup does not mind. It was good the whole way down regardless of who got the credit. And there is the strangest thread of all in it, the free book. A slow week of unsold coffee, a careful question about a bean, a rabbi's plain ruling that it was really a berry, and then a giveaway that quietly became the most used Haggadah on earth, read in kitchens and barracks and the White House itself. A coffee promotion turned into a sacred text on millions of tables. Sell coffee, end up in scripture. Nobody could have planned it. There is a fortune in the cup, converted into limestone and boxwood on a Tennessee hill, a mansion built drop by drop out of 10 million ordinary mornings. There is a war in it, the rationed pound and the canteen cup, and the whole generation retrained on instant powder. There is a percolator bubbling in it, and a jingle, and a coffee clatch, and a diner counter with a bottomless nickel cup. A great deal of a country's morning is dissolved in there, if you know to taste for it. And none of it announces itself, which is the truest thing about the whole story. The cup does not tell you any of this. It is just warm, brown, and reliable, the same today as yesterday, exactly the consistency a man on a horse spent his life chasing. The history is silent in it, folded down small, the way history usually is in the ordinary things we hold without thinking. You could drink this every morning for 50 years and never once hear the farm boy or the fire or the rabbi or the president who talked about bears, but you know now, so drink it slowly tonight. Let the warmth settle into your hands. Somewhere in this plain cup is a schoolteacher's trained nose and a burned hotel and a slogan nobody said and a book that outran its own advertisement, all of it hiding quietly in something as simple as coffee. You drink it down, the good first sips and the cooling middle and the last drop at the bottom, and the last drop, it turns out, was carrying the whole story the entire time. Good to the last drop. Every word of it, finally, true. So there it is. You bought raw beans from a barrel and roasted them in a smoky skillet. You watched a man hand a hotel 20 pounds of free coffee and win. You sat through a slogan a president never said, opened a free book that turned out to be sacred, stretched a rationed pound across 6 long weeks, stirred instant powder in a foxhole, and listened to a percolator bubble its way into a jingle you will never quite get out of your head. Somewhere under all of that were real people. A Kentucky school teacher who trained his own nose because nobody else would. A British taster who could smell a country in a handful of beans. An advertising man who thought to ask a question everyone else assumed was closed. Families who kept a careful holiday. Soldiers who kept it far from home. And a whole country of tired hands reaching, morning after morning, for something warm. It is a strange thing how much history hides inside something as ordinary as a cup of coffee. A burned hotel, a misquoted president, a mansion made of mornings, a bean that turned out to be a berry. None of it announces itself. It just sits there quietly in the warmth, waiting for someone to notice. Thank you for spending this hour here with me, drifting through all of it towards sleep. There is nothing left to decide tonight, no barrel to scoop, no skillet to watch, no pound to make last. The work is all done, and it was done long ago, by other hands. So let your shoulders drop, let the blanket settle its full weight over you. Let the last of the day go soft and quiet, the way steam fades off a cup left to cool on the table. You made it good, all the way down. Sleep well.